Chapter 293, Blood Refining Body Cultivator. Damn bastard. Who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in our business? At that moment, the masked leader finally returned to his senses. When he took a closer look at Hushi's frail figure, exquisite face, pure white skin, and body without any spiritual power fluctuations, he immediately sneered without the fear that he'd had a moment ago. You're only relying on a spiritual weapon that doesn't require spiritual power, yet you want to take advantage of us? Dream on. Haven't I told you yet? I'm a blood-refining body cultivator, not an ordinary spiritual cultivation martial artist. Even if you use a magical weapon, don't think that you can survive under my hands. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. In this world, most martial artists chose the road of spiritual cultivation. However, there were also a few who had poor qualifications, and eventually decided to refine their bodies instead. Refining the body was 100 times more painful than spiritual cultivation, and the majority didn't survive the training. In the end, they could only die like an ordinary person. Therefore, exceptions such as Nangong Yus were abnormal. Being able to achieve a dual soul cultivation base was near impossible. The ranks of refining the body were divided into a total of honing the tendons, refining the blood, cleansing bone marrow, tempering the bones, casting off a mortal body and being reborn, and becoming an immortal. Don't think that a blood-refining body cultivator was weak, because if they wanted to advance, they didn't have to train hard for decades. Once they broke through the first rank, a blood-refining body cultivator would be on an equal level regarding the strength of a high-rank foundation establishment stage martial artist. The moment Hushi noticed their bodies emitting an orange light, she was momentarily curious yet amazed. Of course, she wasn't afraid of their strength. Instead, she was thinking about the differences between the methods of training for refining the body and the methods of training she gave to Shi Jia and the others. Although Shi Jia and the others were now rapidly improving, there was still no better way for them to advance. If she could combine her training methods with the blood-refining body cultivation method, wouldn't it help them to reach a new whole level? Seeing the surprise on Hushi's face, the masked leader couldn't help but be supremely proud of himself. So lifting up his large axe, he rushed forth as he shouted, "I'll let you have a taste of my big axe." With a loud boom, the white fog surged forth and completely enveloped the two people fighting, blocking them from view. However, while the remaining few strong men had full confidence in their boss, they couldn't help but loudly tease, "Boss, remember to keep that little rabbit alive. We don't mind playing with him, even if he is a little boy. Boss, even if you chop off his hands and feet, spare that beautiful face of his. Adding it to our loot collection would be good too. Ha ha ha." The men's cruel and rough laughter made the girl on the ground curl up into a ball and tremble violently, tears of desperation streaming down her cheeks. If that youngster died, her fate would be incredibly miserable. What's more, that youngster, to save her would. Suddenly, the girl blankly stared ahead with wide eyes. She'd noticed that the initially thick fog was now slowly dispersing, allowing a rhythmic thumping to be heard before that too ultimately stopped when the fog cleared. The next moment, she saw a youngster dressed in pure white robes unhurriedly walking towards them. Twisted around his right hand, there was a purple-colored vine, while in his left hand, he was carrying a human head. Although the human head was dripping blood, the youngster's clothes weren't stained at all, as if he was a spotless white fairy untainted by the dirt of the world. At the same time, he seemed like an aloof god that looked down on everyone. Chapter 294. The Eye of the Array? The Core of the Array? The girl suddenly covered her mouth and uttered a muffled sound of joy, while tears continuously rolled down her cheeks like a strand of pearls with its string snapped. While the group of strong men who had previously been excited and were jeering non-stop, simultaneously showed horrified expressions. Staggering back several steps, they were unwilling to believe that their powerful boss had been slaughtered. However, once they squinted to scrutinize the head, they recognized the familiar face. His facial features were twisted grotesquely, his eyes were wide open, and the black cloth covering his face had disappeared, revealing an expression of utter horror and despair. Spare our lives. Some of the men dropped to their knees, kowtowing to beg for mercy, while others screamed and tensed to flee into the thick fog. The purple vine in Hushy's hand flashed as it suddenly sprang forward. In the next second, it was like a sword as it pierced the backs of those who wanted to run away. Blood trickled down the leaves of the vine to drip unseen to the ground layered with white fog, and in a heartbeat, the air was permeated with the thick stench of blood. Although, when Hushy retrieved the vine, the purple leaves were already clean and fresh. You couldn't even see a trace of the blood. The purple abyss vine swayed in delight, expressing its happiness and desire to continue consuming blood. Hushy immediately rejected the purple abyss vine's wish to kill and eat in the white fog, and put the unwilling vine back into her space. She then slowly walked towards the only strong man who remained alive. The strong man currently had a blank look in his eyes as he trembled and stared at the corpses of his companions. Due to the trembling, his teeth were chattering together. And in the next moment, there was an overwhelming stench of urine as a wet patch spread between his legs. "Please have mercy, young master, spare my life. I beg of you, please spare my life. I won't dare do anything. I wouldn't dare." Hushy's towering figure looked down at him as she coldly asked, "Tell me, how long have you been in this white fog and how many martial artists have you robbed?" How could that man dare to conceal the truth? He quickly kowtowed and said, "Answering, young master, we were the first ones to enter this white fog. It's been 6 days. In the beginning, we didn't know that this white fog could completely absorb a martial artist's spiritual power. We just wanted to profit from the medicinal field. But later, when we discovered that those spiritual cultivation martial artists who usually think so highly of themselves would become useless and helpless in the white fog, we came up with the plan of robbing them." The man raised his head and looked at Hushy, only to find her eyes focusing on him. "Continue, say what you know." Yes. This small one absolutely wouldn't dare conceal anything. The man was so frightened that his trembling grew more violent before he quickly continued. "Normally us body refining cultivators are bullied and humiliated by spiritual cultivators. Yet now we had an opportunity to take revenge. Moreover, this white fog is very strange. After we explored deeper, we couldn't find the way out. Also, we couldn't find a way to enter the medicinal field. Therefore, we all figured that we might as well wait around here and focus on robbing the martial artists whose spiritual powers were drained." Hushy furrowed her brows. "There's no way to enter the medicinal field?" "We didn't find it, however. However, we met a group of extremely powerful martial artists. Although they didn't have any spiritual power, the imposing aura being emitted from their bodies was immense. We didn't dare approach them and instead, we quietly ran away. But I remember hearing them talking about wanting to enter the medicinal field, and that to do so, they had to find the eye of the array, or the core of the array, or something." "The eye of the array? The core of the array?" The wrinkle between Hushy's beautiful eyebrows deepened. As she'd expected, this white fog was a natural array. Chapter 295. Major Cloud Array. Since she'd read the ancient records left by Old Man Shumi, she had some understanding about arrays, but at most, it could only be regarded as minimal. So if she wanted to break the array, it was simply impossible. The strong man noticed that Hushy was lost in thought and completely unguarded. His hands that were by his side slowly moved towards his chest pocket. He knew that this youngster before him would never let him go, so this being the case, he might as well strike first and try to gain an advantage. He abruptly took out a tube which stored poisonous needles, and fiercely aimed one at the youngster's heart. With a quiet swoosh, a needle flickering with green light flew directly towards Hushy's chest. A vicious light gleamed within the man's eyes, and he couldn't help but shout as he stood up, "Bastard, go die!" Yet before he could finish his curse, his eyes opened wide in horror. What he saw was that the needle surrounded by flickering green light was unexpectedly caught between Hushy's slender and fair fingers. Then, before he could react, the needle suddenly flew back towards him, straight towards his left eye. "Oh!" The man uttered a pained scream as he covered his left eye and tumbled to the ground. He wanted to howl in anguish and beg for mercy, but before he could say a word, His eye that had been pierced by the needle began to rot while a white foam mixed with blood filled his mouth. There was so much that it started to overflow, and he had to keep spitting it out. After a moment, he stopped breathing. Hushi was too lazy to even glance at him, and turned to leave. The young girl who'd initially been curled up on her side with a frightened look on her face suddenly returned to her senses and shouted, young master, please stop." Hushi stopped and somewhat impatiently looked at her. The girl had a delicate and pretty face, a petite figure, a well-proportioned build, and she appeared to be about 17 to 18 years old. Unfortunately, she couldn't stop trembling as she tried to cover herself with the pile of rags that she clutched. She looked absolutely pitiful. The girl shivered under Hushi's cold gaze, but nonetheless, she held back the fear and shame bubbling within her heart to lower her head and quietly say, "Young master, many thanks for your kindness. Can you please tell me your name? I will certainly repay you in the future." "No need," Hushi indifferently replied. "I didn't mean to save you. They were just unpleasant to look at, nothing more." A trace of disappointment flashed within the girl's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with even more gratitude. "No matter how it happened, if you hadn't saved me, I really don't know. My name is Qingchua, and I'm a disciple of the Red Cloud sect. Young master, if you have anything that requires my help in the future, please don't hesitate to find me at the Red Cloud sect. I'll certainly go to any length to repay young master's favor." The girl had initially wanted to use a jade tablet or talisman for help, but in this white fog, she couldn't open her storage ring. This made her heart feel upset and ashamed. Hushi nodded her head to indicate that she understood, then turned around to leave once more. Seeing his back as he turned around, Qingchua bit her lower lip and suddenly said, "Young master, do you want to enter the medicinal field? I know the way to enter it." Hushi stopped in her tracks, her gaze not as cold as it was before as she looked back at the girl. Qingchua's cheeks reddened, and she slightly lowered her eyelashes. Then she softly said, I heard my sect elder say that Zijin Master's medicinal field is known as the 100 Herb Mist, and that the array inside is the powerful Major Cloud Array. There are a total of 2 sections to the array, the core, and the 64-part eye. Only one of them is in this white fog though. If you want to break the Major Cloud Array, you need to find the array eye and cut off its energy supply. With that, the array core will shortly appear as a portal door. That portal door is the gateway to the medicinal field. Chapter 296. We will definitely meet again. I just have to find this core of the array? Qingchua tilted her head to the side in thought for a moment, then said, "Actually, there is a way. That is, a way to destroy all 64 parts of the array eye in a short period, causing the array to briefly cease functioning. Although this period of time will only be for a few short breaths, if you're prepared to enter the medicinal field, then it's still possible. But wanting to find the 64 parts of the array eye within a short time is practically impossible because once the time runs out, the destroyed parts of the array will be automatically restored. Moreover, the force the fog uses to absorb spiritual power will dramatically increase." Hushi looked pensive as she said, "I understand. Thank you for telling me this." Having said that, Hushi withdrew a set of clothes from her space and gave them to Qingchua, before she indifferently said, "This should be enough to repay you for your information. It's dangerous inside this white fog, so you should hurry up and leave." This time she didn't stop and quickly disappeared into the thick fog. Left alone, the girl quickly dressed in the clothes that had been handed to her. Lifting up one of the sleeves to the tip of her nose, she smelled the scent of fresh medicinal herbs, and a faint blush covered both of her cheeks. "We'll meet again, right? We will definitely meet again." Hushi's figure disappeared into the fog, and to ensure that no one was around, she immediately summoned the purple abyss vine from her space. As the purple abyss vine came into contact with the white fog, it promptly began swaying excitedly. It then started transmitting its excitement and cravings to Hushi through her divine sense. However, Hushi didn't dare let it do as it pleased and refused to allow it to absorb more spiritual power. If it were to cause another whirlpool within the white fog, or directly touch the array, then she would be in big trouble. After appeasing the purple abyss vine, and promising to give it some spiritual fire for it to eat when they entered the medicinal field. The purple abyss vine reluctantly calmed down. Hushi flicked her hands, and in a split second, several hundred purple shadows flew out, all of them instantly shooting in all directions of the white fog. This was the purple abyss vine's unique technique of dividing its body into thousands of vines, and it was the quickest way to search for the core and the eye of the array in this boundless white fog. Each of the purple abyss vine's subvines was connected to Hushi's divine sense. Unfortunately, this meant that each subvine was dramatically weakened compared to its usual strength, rendering it unable to attack. It also meant that if it was attacked, the damage would be relatively severe, and most of it would be inflicted on Hushi's divine sense. Soon, in as long as it takes to burn a stick of incense, and Hushi's complexion was becoming a little pale, the purple vine wrapped around her wrist began excitedly bouncing around. It was like it was eagerly trying to tell her about something. Finally, Hushi opened her eyes to reveal a sharp glint of purple swirling within their depths. In a split second, all of the purple abyss vine's subvines returned to Hushi's body as fast as sharp arrows. Excellent, she had found all 64 parts of the array's eye. Unfortunately, she couldn't find the core of the array, which would have made everything a lot easier. After all, the core of the array was the array's lifeline and foundation, so no matter what kind of array it was, they were typically concealed well to prevent it from being destroyed. It was normal that the purple abyss vine couldn't find it. However, with the exact location of the 64 parts of the array's eye, it wouldn't be too complicated for her to destroy it within a short time. A corner of Hushi's mouth stretched into a faint smile, and with a light tap of her foot, she disappeared from where she stood. The location of the first part of the array's eye was nearby, so Hushi arrived beside it very quickly. The white fog surrounding the part of the array's eye was apparently a lot thicker than other areas, which made the draining of spiritual power extremely powerful. Hushi's eyes focused, and the main part of the purple abyss vine sprang out, heading towards the center of the array's eye without any hesitation. Before her, there was only a thick layer of fog, but she still heard a crash echo around her, as if something had broken. Chapter 297, Black-Clothed Man. Next, the white fog started surging around her, like a huge rock thrown into a tranquil lake. The first part of array's eye had been eliminated. Hushi tapped her foot again, and at lightning speed, she proceeded towards the second part of the array's eye. The location of the second part of the array's eye was more remote than the first's. As soon as Hushi neared it, she couldn't help but shudder. Even though it was already cold in the white fog, this area seemed to be several times colder. Moreover, even though the white fog was thick, you could still see about 3 meters ahead. However, the white fog here was so thick that there was nearly zero visibility. Hushi wiped at the water vapor gathering on her face, feeling the bitingly cold air seeping into her bones. At this moment, her hair and clothes were wet, and to withstand the cold air, she had no other choice but to use her internal energy. With her powerful internal energy, she was now able to tolerate the cold environment. Hushi no longer hesitated, and the purple abyss vine sprung out from her hand in a flash. With a crash, the second part of the array's eye was broken within the white fog without mishap. Due to this, the rolling of the white fog became more violent, and its absorption of spiritual power increased to the point that it made all of Hushi's meridians tremble. She didn't dare stay any longer, so she turned around to leave. However, just as she was about to use her qinggong, her expression suddenly changed. Then, like a shadow, her figure jumped back a few steps. The thick fog in front of her still made everything hard to discern, but she could vaguely see a tall silhouette slowly approaching her. Just as Hushi was filled with bewilderment, she heard the deep voice of a man that was filled with murderous intent. "Who let you touch a part of the array's eye?" Hushi was momentarily shocked. This person also knew about the array's eye? Her brow furrowed, yet she didn't answer the man and instead raised her foot, moving to flee like a bird. "You want to escape?" The man's voice was cold as he snorted in contempt. Hushi had barely jumped into the air before an invisible force wrapped around her ankle, dragging her back. This time, an alarmed expression finally revealed itself on Hushi's face. Hushi waved her right hand without hesitation, and a purple shadow shot towards the figure within the thick fog. The purple vine trembled and waved in the air as it absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog, its momentum gradually increasing. Just as it was about to fly towards the man, it twisted itself up like a small storm, signaling its intent to shred the man to pieces by whistling through the air. However, a scene of the man being ripped into pieces didn't happen as Hushi expected. Instead, she heard the man make an exclamation of surprise in a puzzled tone before he then grabbed the purple abyss vine with one hand. After he tugged on it a few times, it was left entirely immobilized. Hushi was shocked once again, but before she could react, she felt an immense force grab her, and she abruptly tumbled forwards. With a thump, she harshly made contact with something, causing her to feel faint and her vision to blur. Her nose filled with the white fog's cold atmosphere mixed with the robust and unfamiliar scent of a man. You're just a low-level martial artist, yet you're able to control the purple abyss vine, haha. A deep, dark, and husky voice sounded above her head. Obviously, it was only a soft laugh, but it made a person's blood run cold when they heard it. Speak, who told you about the location of the array? Hushi raised her head and saw a handsome face before her, with features as sharp as a blade. The man looked to be about 24 to 25 years old, and he was dressed entirely in black. His features were undoubtedly handsome, but a callous aura surrounded his appearance. It was as if a cold and murderous spirit had crawled out of the depths of the underworld. Chapter 298. Immortal Silk. Hushi struggled, and found that without her realizing, thread as thin as a strand of hair had wrapped around her body. The other end of the thread was gripped in the man's hand, and at this moment, she was just like a fish on a chopping board with no way to escape. If it were an ordinary person who was facing such a situation, he likely would be frightened and panic. However, what kind of person was Hushi? When she'd carried out missions in the past, she'd encountered all sorts of dangers, and had fought many different types of drug lords. A corner of her mouth stretched into a sneer before a beautiful, yet cold voice unhurriedly left her bright red lips. Such a joke. If you can find the parts of the array's eye, why can't I? Was this major cloud array created by your family? In the end, you're nothing more than a useless person who was trapped in this array, and was unable to come out. The man was astonished when he heard her remark. Growing up until now, he had never encountered anyone who dared speak to him like this. After a long while, he quietly chuckled, but that laugh didn't reach his eyes. Instead, his glare was cold. Excellent, your cultivation base isn't high, yet your courage isn't small. Since you court death yourself, then I'd like to help you accomplish it. After I cripple your cultivation base, I'll use the soul search technique to get the information from you. The result is the same for you either way. As his words fell, a sharp light flashed from his hand and suddenly flew towards Hushi's heart. However, in the next moment, a shocked expression appeared on the man's face. He watched as Hushi, who was supposed to be restricted by the immortal silk and unable to budge, suddenly bent down and at a moment of life or death, avoid a fatal blow. Following that, the immortal silk restraining Hushi like glue abruptly lit up, turning a charred color and withering away. It then fell to the ground as ash. The trace of a sneer showed on a corner of Hushi's mouth, and the purple abyss vine in her hand flew straight towards the man without any hesitation. The man was stunned and caught off guard, so he was directly hit on the chest by the purple abyss vine with a snap. If he hadn't reacted in time and quickly stepped back, perhaps his heart would have been directly hit by the purple abyss vine. But despite dodging, his upper clothes had now been shredded, exposing his bare chest, perfect skin tone, and the smooth lines of his six-pack. The man bowed his head to examine his torn clothes and the bloody cut on his chest in disbelief. He couldn't believe that he was injured by such a puny low-level martial artist. Hushi didn't look pleased though. This man before her, compared to her, had more experience and a higher cultivation base. Even if he couldn't use spiritual power within the major cloud array, Hushi didn't believe for a second that if he attacked another way that she would be able to escape again. With this thought in mind, Hushi no longer hesitated, and the purple vine in her hand spun rapidly, causing the surrounding white fog to surge uncontrollably as it flew towards Hushi. In just a moment, the white fog looked like it was going to swallow her. However, in the blink of an eye, It was entirely absorbed by the purple abyss vine in her hand. The purple vine which had absorbed the white fog kept trembling and rubbing its leaves against each other, making a rustling sound as if it was telling Hushi that it wanted to drink blood. As more than half of the white fog was absorbed, the surroundings began to lighten. Yet suddenly it fluctuated, and soon after became denser. Within the white fog, the black-clothed man's face expressed clear shock. As he looked at Hushi and the flickering purple vine in her hand, his expression abruptly changed to one of understanding and excitement. Chapter 299. Escape without a trace. After building up enough force, Hushi's attack made a whistling sound as it launched through the air. Following the whistling, the purple vine abruptly transformed mid-air into many shadows, like 1,000 arrows all shooting straight towards the man. The man's eyes gleamed with a hint of admiration, but then a corner of his mouth curled up. The next second his big hand flipped over, and a flag of blue so dark it seemed black suddenly appeared in his palm. There was no apparent spiritual power being emitted from the flag due to the white fog, but there was a chillingly cold aura surrounding it that could make anyone terrified. With a wave of the flag, every single purple vine was suddenly absorbed inside of it, all of them swallowed up silently and cleanly. The man lightly laughed and went to look at the youngster, but then his expression swiftly froze. There was no trace of the youngster anywhere within the thick white fog. As it turns out, the moment the purple abyss vine had attacked, he'd taken the opportunity to disappear completely. He escaped. He actually dared to escape. A sharp light sparked within the man's eyes. You think you can run away from me? In this world, no matter what he wanted, people or things, they could never get away from his grasp. As soon as the words left his lips, the man's figure disappeared, leaving only the churning white fog to indicate that something was amiss with the major cloud array. The moment Hushi had released the purple abyss vine, she'd used her qinggong to escape far away. Although she was proud, she wasn't arrogant. That black-clothed man had clearly come prepared since he could use a high-level spiritual weapon without spiritual power. Coupled with the disparity in their experience, he wasn't a person she could currently win against. Hushi had initially wanted to destroy the next part of the array's eye, but she was afraid of once again being caught by that crazy black-clothed man. So hesitating for a moment, she pondered over what should she do now instead. After thinking it over for a moment, she once more released the purple abyss vine's subvines, deciding to use it to find Nangong Yu and the others. With help from Nangong Yu, Gu Lufeng, and the others, she didn't believe that there was no way to destroy all 64 parts of the array's eye. However, just as she released the purple abyss vine's subvines, Hushi's complexion promptly changed. As the purple vines shot out like shadows, they unexpectedly made a loud bang. When she was able to see what had occurred clearly, she noticed that they'd blocked a powerful attack. Hushi had an ashen complexion as she looked at the black-clothed man who'd appeared not far away, and coldly said, "You followed me like the spirit of a deceased person. In the end, what do you want?" The fog where Hushi was now standing wasn't as thick as it was before, so the black-clothed man could finally see the youngster's features clearly. Long eyelashes curled upwards, soft and snowy skin, beautiful lips, and long black hair that was dampened by the fog stuck to his cheeks. With such a pure appearance and brightly shining obsidian eyes, he had a countenance that could easily capture anyone's soul. Unexpectedly, it was a stunning youngster who could topple the world with just his looks. He appeared to be about 15 to 16 years old. A child who'd just entered adulthood but not yet 20. It turns out that it was only a tender youngster who'd forced him to such lengths, even causing him to bring out the black banner. The coldness in the black-clothed man's eyes transformed into excitement, and crossing his arms in front of his chest he arrogantly said, "I can allow you to live. However, you have to become one of my people and obey my words. If you do, I can promise you that as long as you help me to destroy this major cloud array, in the future, you'll gain benefits that you never would have imagined having in this lifetime." Hushi looked at him with a "you're crazy" look, then sneered as she said, "There must be something wrong with your brain, or were you born mentally handicapped? Why should I help you break the major cloud array? Even going so far as to make me be one of your people and obey your words? You deserve this based on what?" "Good. Very good. The black-clothed man's eyes suddenly flashed dangerously as a murderous aura condensed within them. It seems that I'll have to let you experience several defeats before you are obedient. Chapter 300. Collaborate. After he spoke, the black flag suddenly flew out and enveloped the two figures, like a cloud covering the sun. There were no apparent spiritual power fluctuations, but the densely cold aura it emitted caused Hushi to be alarmed. She felt like she was being pressured by Mount Tai, and found herself unable to breathe. While this was occurring, the black-clothed man smirked and approached Hushi. As he got closer, the black flag suddenly transformed into a black shadow, and also headed towards Hushi. The purple abyss vine rapidly responded by springing out to fight with the black shadow. Following that, a dark golden blade appeared in the black-clothed man's hand and shot towards Hushi. A loud bang echoed through the white fog, causing it to start violently churning. When the white fog finally settled down, you could see one black ray of light and one purple ray of light intertwined. As the light had become like two ropes, they had tightly bound Hushi together with the man. Both of their complexions were a little ashen, while Hushi's hand was clenched around a green dagger that was firmly pressed against the man's neck. Though on the other side, a golden blade was gripped within the black-clothed man's hand as it firmly pressed against Hushi's chest, as if in the blink of an eye it would pierce her heart. However, shock and amazement showed on the black-clothed man's face. His hand holding the golden blade trembled as he was unsure whether to withdraw or not. He looked at the elegant youngster with shining eyes in bewilderment, taking quite a while before saying, You're a man." A coldness flashed in Hushi's eyes, and the dagger suddenly cut into the skin on the man's neck as she coldly said, "This dagger is smeared with the highly deadly blood-sealing throat poison. Although it's useless against a high-level martial artist, in this white fog you're unable to use spiritual power, and due to this, you won't be able to expel the poison immediately. If you still insist on harassing me, I don't mind if neither of us wins." Feeling an itchy pain from the wound on his neck, the black-clothed man's expression became sterner, and a trace of anger showed on his face. "If you refuse to cooperate, do you really think that I don't have ways to deal with you?" After a brief pause, he coldly said, "If you hadn't rashly destroyed a part of the array's eye, which changed the direction of the 8-track trigrams, I would have already found the array's core and destroyed the major cloud array. Now that you've ruined my plan, shouldn't you pay the price? How about you help me break the array?" Hushi was startled for a moment, while on the contrary, the only thing revealed on her face was a slight trace of hesitation. If this man really could find the array's core, it would save her the time of breaking every part of the array's eye. Looking down, she saw that both of their bodies were tightly joined together, and in a heavy tone said, "Make your black flag release us first." The man slightly lowered his head and smelt the fresh fragrance of medicinal herbs being emitted from her body, so pursing his lips he said, "Your purple abyss vine still restrains me too." Hushi furrowed her brows. "I'll count to 3, and then we'll release each other at the same time." In a flash, the purple abyss vine and the black flag simultaneously retreated and flicked into the air. The purple abyss vine turned into purple light and returned into Hushi's body, while the black flag returned to the man's palm. Hushi quickly stepped back to make space between them and silently took a deep breath, using this opportunity to restore her depleted internal energy. On the other side, the man felt the sudden loss of warmth within his arms and missed the subtle fragrance tickling the tip of his nose. He was somewhat disappointed at the loss for a moment. He looked up at Hushi, and the cold tone within his voice was mixed with a slight gentleness. "To get rid of the major cloud array, it's necessary to find the array's core and cut off its energy supply. Just destroying 1 or 2 of the array's eyes is useless. I have a way to find the array's core. However, there is a strong spiritual power barrier surrounding the array's core. As I can't use the technique within the white fog, wanting to break through the barrier uses a large amount of effort. But if we were to use your purple abyss vine, it would be different." Chapter 301. Enemy on a narrow road. Hushi was shocked, but just as she was about to ask him how to find the array's core, her gaze suddenly focused on something in the distance. Almost at the same time, a happy voice traveled from within the white fog. "Big brother, so as it turns out you're here. We've finally found you." When Hushi heard this voice, the look on her face abruptly changed, and a murderous glint appeared in her eyes. That was the voice of Feng Lianing. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures materialized one after another from the white fog to appear in front of her. In addition to Feng Lianing, who had a look of pleasant surprise on her face, walking beside her was Nie Jinshan and some disciples of the Luli sect. Most of these disciples were at the peak of Meridian's stage, but there were also a few low-leveled gold core stage martial artists. Besides Feng Lianing and Nie Jinshan, amongst the people with them, there was also one other person that Hushi recognized. It was the third prince, Shangguan Rui, and his 2 gold core stage personal bodyguards that she'd met at the entrance of Hell King Manor. Hushi's face became very unsightly. She hadn't expected that the black-clothed man would actually be Feng Lianying's older brother. Not only that, but dealing with an enemy on a narrow road. In the midst of this white fog, she had unexpectedly bumped into this vicious white lotus, Feng Lianing. Sure enough, Feng Lianying's attention was so focused on the black-clothed man that she hadn't seen Hushi yet. But as soon as she turned her head, her beautiful eyes couldn't help but widen before she instantly uttered a scream filled with anger and resentment. "Slut? Why are you here?" Hushi's hand clenched tightly around a vine of the purple abyss vine, while cold sweat seeped out of her palms. Although on the surface her face was expressionless as she sneeringly said, "Who is the slut that's calling someone a slut?" "Of course the slut is calling," Feng Lianing started saying before she realized what she'd said and stopped. She couldn't help but snarl as she took out her flying sword to stab at Hushi. But she'd forgotten that in this white fog she was unable to use spiritual power, rendering the flying sword just like an ordinary long sword. On top of that, she was just like a useless person without enough strength to even truss a chicken. Feng Lianing had only just managed to feebly thrust the flying sword forward before Hushi stopped it, and then without hesitation, lift her foot to fiercely kicked Feng Lianying's stomach. Feng Lianing screamed as she flew back like a kite with an abruptly snapped string before she then crashed down hard to the ground. With a deathly pale complexion, she covered her stomach and started to incessantly howl in pain. When Nie Jinshan saw that Feng Lianing was seriously injured, he was startled and filled with heartache. Quickly approaching her, he helped support her to sit up, and then stuffed a medicinal pill into her mouth. "Little sister Lianing, are you all right?" Feng Lianing clutched his wrist with her nails deeply embedding themselves into his flesh, and with a slightly hysterical voice said, "Kill him, kill that slut for me. I'll grind his bones into dust and scatter the powder." "Okay. Little sister Lianing, rest assured, I will definitely take revenge for you." With that, Nie Jinshan suddenly stood up and bellowed towards the disciples of the Luli sect behind him. "Kill that stinky brat and dismember his body for me. Whoever ends up killing him, I will inform the clan head and recommend that they are allowed to become an inner sect disciple." After having said that, a green disc instantly appeared in his hand. At first, the disc didn't seem to be anything remarkable. Yet, when Nie Jinshan bit the tip of his tongue and allowed the blood to drip onto the disc, it suddenly lit up with a dazzlingly bright green light. The weapon that had initially lacked spiritual power fluctuations instantly absorbed a part of the spiritual power within the white fog, and began to emit an intense aura. The elegant yet frail-looking teenager stood alone in the white fog, and with the purple-colored vine in his hand shuddering slightly, a corner of his mouth curled up to form a stubborn sneer. Chapter 302, Big Brother. As 10 or so martial artists rushed towards her, Hushi was like a lone wolf being surrounded by a group of beasts. It was clear that in the next moment she would be torn to shreds, yet she didn't cower or show any signs of fear. The disc in Nie Jinshan's hand flew directly towards Hushi as he leapt into the air while roaring, "Go die!" The disc gave him a brief burst of spiritual power, giving him the confidence to feel that he could dismember this vile bastard's body that had wounded his little sister Lianing. But immediately after yelling, a scene occurred that shocked him to the core. The moment that disc arrived before Hushi, it abruptly started trembling. Following that, a purple-colored shadow wrapped around it until it formed a ball. That purple shadow was, of course, a purple-colored vine and a 5th-ranked devil plant, the purple abyss vine. The purple abyss vine had been like an excited puppy as it dashed towards the disc, and in a short time, tightly wrapped its vines around it. Then, like a big mouth, the disc was swallowed whole. A crunching noise, similar to that of a chewing sound, came from the purple vine, and mixed with a rustling sound caused by the purple vine swaying in excitement. In the deathly quiet fog, these sounds echoed in the surroundings and were particularly frightening. You. Nie Jinshin clutched his chest, which was in pain, and pointed to Hushi, asking with a trembling voice, "How can you use spiritual power within the white fog?" A smirk appeared in a corner of Hushi's mouth, and the purple vine in her hand suddenly transformed into a whip. Next, the whip fiercely slashed at the closest disciple of the Luli sect. That person was merely at the meridian stage, so being hit by the purple abyss vine's whip caused him to immediately wail in pain and fall to the ground, a bloody and gruesome wound visible on his body. Watching as Feng Lianing, the person who had bullied her in the secret territory, now trembled on the ground with blood flowing from a corner of her mouth, Hushi felt pleased in her heart. It seemed that this white fog wasn't entirely lacking in benefits. When Feng Lianing met Hushi's disdain-filled eyes, she was no longer able to bear it. So standing up, she at first staggered before she then rushed towards the black-clothed man, brokenly weeping. "Big brother, you must help me take revenge." The black-clothed man frowned, his expression gloomy and cold as he slowly asked, "You know him?" Feng Lianying's body was on the verge of collapsing as she gave him a sad and heartbroken look, and said in a trembling voice, "Big brother, that bastard is Shiyu. He cheated me and robbed me of my Zijin Palace inheritance. He also provoked the relationship between our Luli sect and Brother Yu. Obviously he's a man, but he shamelessly seduced Brother Yu. Big brother, quickly kill that bastard for me." The eyes of the black-clothed man suddenly filled with frost. As his gaze fell on Hushi, he slowly stepped forward as he asked, "You seduced Nangong Yu?" Feng Lianing felt delighted in her heart. However, the expression on her face showed even more sadness and distress. "Big brother, the injuries to my body were caused by him. He also joined with Gu Lufeng of Shengda Hall to speak rudely to us of the Luli sect. They said that even though we were from the Feng family, we still wouldn't enter their eyes. I'm so angry it's unbearable and want to teach him a lesson. Who would have thought that Brother Yu, who has always loved me dearly, would be bewitched by such a bastard and wholeheartedly protect him? Such a lowly person who doesn't know shamelessness and is a vicious bastard like him. I will never allow him to live in this world. Big brother, please kill him for me." Nie Jinshin, who was standing to the side, quickly echoed what Feng Lianing had said with, "Young master, I personally saw Gu Lufeng injure little sister Lianing. At that time, Nangong Yu not only didn't help little sister Lianing, but he instead protected this loathsome brat. You must help seek justice for little sister Lianing." Chapter 303. Leave Nangong Yu? Even though it was a matter that had nothing to do with himself, Shangguan Rui couldn't help but interrupt as he stood off to the side. "I've seen this boy in Hell King Manor before. The servants there all treat him extremely respectfully. It may be assumed that his relationship with Hell King must be exceptionally intimate." Hearing Shangguan Rui's words, Feng Lianing grit her teeth out of jealousy. But when she turned her head and saw the black-clothed man's gloomy look, a delighted smile couldn't help but spread across her face. Big brother had also hoped that the Feng family could be connected by marriage to Hell King Manor. Yet now this loathsome brat had inserted himself between her and Nangong Yu, destroying their relationship with Hell King Manor. How could Big Brother not be angry? Even though she didn't know what trick that brat had used, it was clear that in this white fog, these people weren't his match. The only one who could kill him was her big brother, Feng Yunjing. That's right, the black-clothed man in front of her was the young master of the Feng family. Songming Kingdom's most powerful and feared man of the Feng family, Feng Yunjing. Although the Luli sect was one of the 4 major sects in the Miluo continent, in actuality, it was all because of the influence of the Feng family. In the Luli sect, Feng Lianing was capable of stirring up all sorts of trouble, and yet she could still be called the young head of the sect. But compared to her big brother, Feng Yunjing, in regards to terms of privilege or strength, it was like comparing clouds to mud. From a child until now, Feng Lianing had been afraid of this half-brother. Except for Nangong Yu, She had never seen a man as fearful and powerful as her big brother. Therefore, as long as her big brother was willing to help her, killing this bastard would be as simple as crushing an ant. Feng Yunjing's face was gloomy and cold, leaving his thoughts utterly unreadable as he slowly walked towards Hushi. Hushi's expression was also no longer as willful as before, but instead grave as she tightly clenched the purple vine in her hand. Feng Yunjing didn't make any moves to attack her. Instead, he slowly walked to stand in front of Hushi, then darkly said, "You is it? Perhaps I can give you an opportunity to not die." With a brief pause, he then suddenly took a step forward, closing the distance between the two of them before he arrogantly said, "As long as you vow to leave Nangong Yu and never see him again, as well as helping me to break the major cloud array, I'll let you go. How does that sound?" A corner of Hushi's mouth faintly curled upwards. "I can." Delight flashed deeply within Feng Yunjing's eyes without him realizing. However, he heard Hushi abruptly raise her voice while laughing lightly. "Of course, that's as long as you personally kill the people who offended me, who also happen to be in front of me." Her gaze fell upon Feng Lianing, and the smile on her mouth became more devilish. "As long as you personally kill Feng Lianing and Nie Jinshan, I will help you to break the major cloud array. You say, how is it? You bastard." After hearing the conversation between the pair, Feng Lianing screamed, and regardless of everything, she rushed towards Hushi. "Bastard, I want you to die. You better die. Go die. Go die." However, Feng Lianing had barely rushed towards Hushi before she was restrained by Feng Yunjing, leaving her completely unable to move even a simple step. Feng Lianing was shocked and raised her head to stare at her big brother. Then she hysterically screamed, "Feng Yunjing, even you are seduced by him? Such a shameless man. In the end, what's so good about him? Aren't you afraid that if Daddy knows?" The sounds of a slap echoed in their ears, and Feng Lianing was thrown to the ground by Feng Yunjing's hit. Lifting her head, she met with her big brother's dark and cold eyes, causing her to tremble all over. An unspeakable fear surged within her heart, draining her complexion to a deathly pale. "Big brother, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I said that out of anger." Feng Lianying's heart was full of fear, to the extent that her voice was trembling and making her words hard to understand. Chapter 304. Pray Feng Yunjing didn't look at her, rather he looked towards Hushi and coldly said, "You have no option regarding this matter. Either you never see Nangong Yu again and help me break the array, or, if I don't agree?" Feng Yunjing's face sank, and he suddenly reached out his hand to grip Hushi's chin, forcing her to look up as he faintly sneered. "Did you use this face to bewitch Nangong Yu? I see that it's indeed a feast for the eyes, but if Nangong Yu were to know that you'd become one of my people, I wonder whether he would still want you or not." Arg dash. Feng Yunjing suddenly released Hushi's chin, his face ashen as he stepped backwards. Then slowly reaching out his hand, he gently touched his earlobe. His hand unexpectedly felt something cold and damp, before he realized it was blood. A gleam of killing intent flashed within Hushi's eyes, and the purple vine suddenly sprang out from behind her. Like a curtain that covered the sky, it erected a terrifying barrier behind her. "There may be another option, and that is you all die." Her voice was laced with bone-chilling anger and humiliation, which made her jade-white face appear bright red like a peach blossom. This unexpectedly increased her beauty, to the point that she could easily hook a person's soul. A glint flashed across Feng Yunjing's eyes, and the smile on his face was dark and overbearing with the hint of his aggressive nature, indicating his thrill to a challenge. "Very good. Never before has prey managed to escape from my hands. Shiyu, I'd like to see whether or not you can accomplish it." A blackish-blue flag sword, entangling itself with the purple vine, and making it clear that they were evenly matched. A long sword appeared in Hushi's hand, and from the tip of the sword, countless shadow swords erupted that enveloped Feng Yunjing. Such an exquisite sword technique was like an illusion that utilized one's full strength to carry it out. Obviously, there were no spiritual power fluctuations, but it was like a gorgeous dance, beautiful and magnificent. Momentarily the sky actually changed, with clouds and mist covering the sun. Feng Yunjing moved to avoid the sword's attack, as a touch of shock and admiration flashed within his eyes. Suddenly, his body emitted a red light, while a dark rumble echoed in the sky and rang in Hushy's ears. It's a pity, but if I were to let you continue advancing in this white fog, there's the possibility that not even I would be able to stop you. At this very moment, you are doomed to become my prey, Shiyu. As his words fell, the red light suddenly intensified, like blood condensing, before it then swept towards Hushy. The blazing atmosphere caused Hushy's steps to falter, and an amazed expression appeared on her face. There was obviously no spiritual power in the atmosphere, but when it touched her body, it was unexpectedly able to thoroughly absorb her physical energy. In just a moment, Hushy couldn't even lift her sword, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Her complexion became deathly pale, and her feet staggered as if she was about to fall. A corner of Feng Yunjing's mouth curled into a callous smile, and he extended one of his long arms to pull her into his embrace. Yet who would have thought that the moment he reached out his hand, he would be surprised? Feng Yunjing's figure rapidly retreated, but he was unable to avoid the full force of the sword wrapped in a murderous aura. This resulted in the cloth on his sleeve being torn, and a ghastly cut to appear on his arm. Hushy's body became limp, yet instead of falling to the ground, she fell into a warm embrace. A familiar scent assailed her nostrils. It was like she had finally reached a safe harbor, a place she had been longing for with great expectations. Unaware of why, Hushy felt her nose itch as she softly called out a single name, Nangongyu. Nangongyu suddenly released her to grab her shoulders, examining every inch of her for injuries. The palms that touched her body were scalding hot, and at this moment, they were shaking slightly, showing how frightened the owner of the hands was. Chapter 305. If it's unreasonable this king indulges him, Nangongyu, I'm all right. My power is just depleted. That's all. Momentarily, Hushy was unsure whether to laugh or cry. In front of so many people, in the end, until when was this guy going to continue touching her? In response to her, however, Nangongyu gathered her into his arms and tightly embraced her. Fear. Fortunately, you're all right. Fortunately, I found you, Sheer. Hushy felt extreme pain, like her bones were being crushed. This man was acting like he wanted to fuse her to himself, making her unable to breathe. But deep in her heart, there flowed a warmth that she couldn't precisely pinpoint, making her restless, angry, and lonely heart of a moment ago become calm. It wasn't until a good while later that Nangongyu finally loosened his hold on Hushy, then turned towards Feng Yunjing. Feng Yunjing's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold and dangerous light gleaming within them. His gaze fell on Nangongyu's hands, one of which was firmly wrapped around the youngster's slender waist, while the other was helping to tidy up the youngster's hair now and then. It also regularly drifted down to stroke his warm and tender cheek, as if confirming his existence. The youngster, who was still confronting him with bared fangs like a fierce little beast a moment ago, was now nestled in Nangongyu's arms, looking utterly adorable and docile. The two people standing together and cuddling seemed like a pair of jade annulus made in heaven. Both male and female, as beautiful as a painting. So beautiful, it was unpleasant to the eye. Before Feng Yunjing had a chance to say anything, Feng Lianying's voice was heard sobbing behind him. Brother Yu, why do you only care about whether or not young master she was injured? I was ambushed by him just a moment ago, and until now my stomach is still in a lot of pain. Aren't you concerned about me even a little bit? In your heart, do our feelings for each other, over so many years, not even compare with this treacherous boy? Hushy raised her eyebrows, and she couldn't help but step backwards from the hands that were looped around her body. Yes, she had just beaten up Feng Lianing. Moreover, after she'd finished beating her up, until now, she'd felt very pleased. She would like to see how Nangongyu would react when he saw that his beloved little sister Lianing had sustained an injury. And what's more, it was caused by her. Seeing her wanting to get away from him, Nangongyu's face sank. Suddenly, he reached out his hands to pull her back, firmly imprisoning her in his arms. His icy cold eyes landed on Feng Lianing, and slowly speaking with a calm tone he said, Sheer is one of this king's people. Anything that he does, if it's justified, this king lets him do as he pleases. If it's unreasonable, then this king indulges him. If you're dissatisfied, then you can bring it up with this king. However, if anyone dares to lay a hand on Sheer behind my back, then don't blame me for being impolite. Feng Lianing watched as Nan Gongyu said this with dagger-like eyes as he glared at Feng Yunjing. Fury flashed in Feng Yunjing's eyes, and he coldly asked, Nan Gongyu, did you hit your head on something? For a guy with an unknown origin, you want to oppose my Feng family? Following that, Feng Yunjing's gaze fell on Hushi while he grit his teeth, the voice leaving his mouth unexpectedly ruthless and irritable. In the end, what method did he use to seduce you? His outstanding face? Lascivious body? Or maybe it was that skillful little mouth? If it's a man or woman like him that you want, then the Feng family can find a few more for you. For trash like him, you dare to offend our Feng family and abuse the kindness we used to save your life. Is he really worth it? Nan Gongyu, it's better for you to give him to me to deal with. How does that sound? Believe me, with such an outcome, both the Feng family and Hell King Manor will be satisfied. The coldness in Hushi's eyes suddenly intensified with his words, while rage surged in her chest to cause a strong murderous aura to overflow from her entire body. Chapter 306. Just a warning. This man had repeatedly humiliated her, and made her angry to the point where she wished she could dismember his body. Due to her anger, her eyes shone bright like stars, while her lips were as delicate and exquisite as rose petals. Her skin was like sparkling and translucent jade flushed with a scarlet peach blossom color. Such world-shaking beauty was bound to stand out from the masses. Seeing the scene in front of him, Feng Yunjing became somewhat crazy, and an intense urge to monopolize him bloomed within his heart. This person, he wanted him. The purple abyss vine in Hushi's hand shook violently as if at any moment it would be unable to resist intervening. However, Nan Gongyu moved faster than her, and a long black sword appeared in his hand, its sharp end pointing straight towards Feng Yunjing. Even though a gentle and noble smile hung on his face, the coldness in his eyes seemed to emphasize his feelings of wanting to tear the man before him to shreds. Feng Yunjing, did you forget? Outside of the secret territory, you're not my match. He paused, and the curve at a corner of his mouth became more gentle, but seemed to emit a bloodthirsty feeling that could make anyone's hair stand on end. In this major cloud array, your cultivation base is worthless. If I wanted to take your life, it would be as easy as flipping my hand. That said, a blinding green ray of light burst from his body. Following this, his figure abruptly disappeared from where he'd stood. Blood refining body cultivator of the 4th rank. One of the disciples of the Luli sect couldn't help uttering a roar of horror. Wasn't Hell King a high-level spiritual cultivation martial artist? Why is he also a blood-refining body cultivator? No one with a dual soul cultivation base had appeared for over 1,000,000 years. In the end, to what extent was Hell King's true strength? Shock also emerged in Feng Yunjing's eyes, and he rapidly stepped backwards to summon all kinds of spiritual weapons to his hands. However, in comparison, Nan Gongyu's long sword was faster and more ruthless. The sword arrived at where Feng Yunjing was standing, and before he was able to transfer all his spiritual power to the spiritual weapons, they all fell to the ground with a clatter. Feng Yunjing's eyes finally revealed no small amount of shock. Just as he wanted to open his mouth to speak, a field of overwhelming power seemed to envelop him. This caused his expression to become deathly pale and his throat to be blocked, making him unable to utter a sound. If they were outside of the major cloud array, he didn't believe that he would lose to Nan Gongyu. Plus, coupled with all the spiritual weapon arrays left in the hands of the Feng family, it absolutely wouldn't be an easy task for Nan Gongyu to take advantage of him. But this major cloud array could absorb a person's spiritual power to the last drop, leave only a smidgen of spiritual power to remain in spiritual weapons, and reduce other types of weapons to scrap iron. He himself couldn't even display 1/10 of his usual strength. Feng Yunjing's complexion turned an unsightly shade before his gaze swept over to Hushi, who was standing nearby and watching. Shock and anger, plus a surge of fighting spirit, rose within his heart. He was unwilling to lose face in front of him. Seeing Nan Gongyu's powerful sword, Nia Jinshen, who had been foolishly watching all this time, suddenly sobered and shouted, Nangongyu, have mercy. However, Nangongyu didn't seem to hear him. The sword suddenly thrust forward and severely pierced Feng Yunjing's left shoulder. Yet while it had missed his heart, it was still dangerously close to it. A deadly silence descended within the white fog. The sound of the sword piercing flesh still rung in their ears. Everyone was frightened by Hell King's horrible strength and ruthlessness, so for a moment, they all kept quiet out of fear. Nangongyu withdrew the black sword and coldly said, "This time was just a warning, but next time, you won't be so lucky." Chapter 307, Rare Treasure, Big Brother. It was at this time that Feng Lianing finally returned to her senses, and she rushed over to support Feng Yunjing, but her hatred-filled gaze locked onto Nangongyu. "Brother you, how could you be so heartless? For such a lowly person you even disregarded the kindness my Feng family has shown towards you." Xing. Once again unsheathing the sword, it was then pointed straight at Feng Lianing. The gleaming cold tip of the sword was less than a centimeter away from her throat, and had even managed to cut the delicate skin, resulting in a subtle amount of pain. A corner of Nangongyu's mouth raised and he slowly said, "If it were not because of the kindness the Feng family had shown me, you all would have died in this white fog long ago. Even your bones would no longer exist." Feng Lianing still wanted to say something more, but when her eyes met with Nangongyu's dark and piercing ones, her breath suddenly caught in her throat. With her face becoming pale, she was momentarily unable to utter a single word. All the disciples of the Luli sect rushed over, worried about the condition of Feng Yunjing's injury. Feng Yunjing pushed them all away, his fathomless black eyes examining the wound on his chest. But when he raised his head once again, his face held no trace of ruthlessness, only calmness. "Nangongyu, is that person really that important to you?" Nangongyu slowly walked back to stand beside Heshi, and reaching out his hand, he gently kneaded her small hand. It wasn't until Heshi had ignored him by flinging his hand away that he'd coldly looked at Feng Yunjing, and faintly said, "Shearer is my treasure. A rare treasure that no one is allowed to covet or touch. What do you think, is he important or not?" Heshi couldn't help rub at the goosebumps that had raised on her arms when she heard that. When had this guy learned to speak so disgustingly? However, she didn't realize that a corner of her mouth had lifted into a shallow curve. Feng Yunjing's gaze swept over Heshi's face, his eyes burning with anger and envy that quickly disappeared. His face was still without any trace of emotion. "Good. I can promise to let him off, as well as ignore your relationship with him for the time being. But you have to let him use his purple abyss vine to help us break the major cloud array." That said, Feng Yunjing looked towards Heshi and slowly said, "As long as you agree to help us break the major cloud array and enter the medicinal field, I promise that all disciples of my Luli sect will not make a move against you while we're in the sealed dragon domain. How about it?" Feng Lianing couldn't help but shriek, "Big brother, why should we let him off?" However, as Feng Yunjing's sharp eyes glanced at her, Feng Lianing felt her voice tremble, and she no longer dared to speak. Heshi frowned as she mentally weighed the advantages and disadvantages of entering the medicinal field with these people. Just at this moment, Gu Lufeng, Qinglong Wuyu, and the others rushed towards them. Once they saw that Heshi wasn't hurt, Gu Lufeng immediately hurried forward and happily said, "Little Yuer, it's good that you're all right." While saying that, his hand was reaching out to touch Heshi's shoulder. The next second, four piercingly cold eyes swept towards him, causing Gu Liufeng's hand to freeze midair. He didn't dare touch Heshi now. Nangongyu pulled Heshi into his arms as he glared at Gu Lufeng in warning, before he then bowed his head towards Heshi and said, "You should agree. Inside the medicinal field, if there's anything that you want, I will help you to get it." Although Nangongyu had confidence regarding his profound cultivation base, if the Luli sect really focused their attention on Heshi, then after they left the secret territory, Heshi would be in danger at every turn. Heshi was slightly startled, but she immediately realized the outcome of the situation if she refused. She turned to Feng Yunjing and indifferently said, "Okay, I can help you to break the major cloud array, but we'll be doing it my way." Feng Yunjing was surprised. "Your way?" Chapter 308, 100 Herb Mist Correct. Hushi laughed faintly. No need to spend time finding the array's core again, because as long as we directly find all 64 parts of the array's eye inside the major cloud array and break them together within a short time, that will suffice. Surprise flashed within Feng Yunjing's eyes, but before he could speak, Nie Jinshin had already exclaimed, "Don't speak nonsense. With there being 64 parts of array's eye, how could we find and break them all in a short time?" Hushi sneered, and like a purple flame, the purple abyss vine in her hand soared, shooting away in all directions. Her voice was like ice crystals falling onto a jade plate, crisp and pleasant to listen to as she spoke with perfect confidence. "Just because you're incapable of doing it, it doesn't mean that I am too. I have already found the locations of all 64 parts of the array's eye. Now, all of you just need to follow the directions of these 64 purple vines to break the array's eye." Everyone present, including Gu Lufeng, Qinglong, and the rest, all had their eyes wide open in shock. As they looked at the beautiful youngster before them, it was like we're looking at an unbelievable monster. The white fog was a place where nobody was able to use spiritual power, and concealed within it were the 64 parts of the array's eye. By just controlling a 5th-ranked devil plant, the purple abyss vine, all 64 parts were easily found. How formidable would a person's divine sense be to be able to do that? How strong would their mental power be? Before them was a youngster who was merely on the foundation establishment stage. In the end, just how did he accomplish it? Feng Yunjing's burning gaze focused on the youngster surrounded by purple vines. The light within his eyes was like a burning flame, expressing his strong desire and determination to possess him. Nangongyu took note of Feng Yunjing's gaze, and his long eyelashes slightly lowered, covering the sharp gleam within his eyes. With the guidance of the purple abyss vine, all 64 parts of the array's eye in the major cloud array were very quickly broken, one by one. The moment when the last part of the array's eye was shattered, Hushi and the others felt an aggressive wind push against them. The white fog before them was swept away by something, and in a flash, it disappeared without a trace. Even the dampness in the air was suddenly restored to a more normal temperature. In the locations where all the parts of the array's eye had been, a bright light abruptly flashed, and a portal array appeared. Without a doubt, this was the portal door to the medicinal field, 100 Herbs Mist. Hushi had already informed everyone that after all 64 parts of the array's eye had been broken, the time frame for the major cloud array to be disabled would be short. They had to take this opportunity to enter the portal array, or else, the subsequent white fog would be more intense and horrible than before. Therefore, almost at the moment when the portal array had appeared, the people of Hell King Manor and the Luli sect had immediately stepped inside. For the martial artists who were trapped within the white fog, unable to leave, once they saw the Luli sect enter the portal array, they quickly followed and entered the portal array too. After the time it took to take a few breaths, the white fog reformed and covered the road ahead with a hazy dampness, causing the remaining people within the white fog to scream in fright and despair. However, this was something that Hushi and the others were unaware of as they had already entered the medicinal field. As soon as she entered the medicinal field, Hushi's senses were assaulted with intense spiritual energy that was mixed with the pure fragrance of plants. Looking up slightly, her expression quickly changed into one of astonishment. The legendary treasure that countless martial artists had fought over, the medicinal field, 100 Herb Mist, was now before her. The medicinal field was really too large. Stretching out in all directions, it was almost impossible to see the edges. Divided into 4 squares, each square contained 1 or 2 types of herbs. Among these medicinal herbs, the lowest grade one was a matured 2nd grade spiritual plant. Chapter 309, Unlimited Craziness and Greed. The side of the medicinal field near where everyone stood, there were rare 4th grade and 5th grade spiritual plants. In regards to every herb, if just a single stalk was sold, the profit would easily be enough to support the entirety of a small sect. On top of that, many of the spiritual plants found here in 100 Herb Mist were uncommon. Hushi gazed into the distance and noticed that about a few hundred meters away, located approximately in the center of the medicinal field, there was a hill covered with green plants. The hill was approximately 4 to 5 meters in height, and neither looked special or majestic. Yet on the mountain, who knew what treasure was planted there? But it actually emitted a splendid multicolored light. While Hushi was studying the multicolored lights, she smelt the scent of a rich medicinal fragrance that was faintly emitted into the air. For a moment, she felt her blood race and itched to grab every treasure in the medicinal field, stuffing them all into her bag. However, such a burning desire lasted only a moment before she immediately became clear-headed and slightly frowned. This medicinal field, it seemed a bit odd. Whether it was because of the extremely expensive spiritual plants inside the medicinal field, or the intoxicating medicinal fragrance permeating the air, but the martial artists in the area seemed seriously out of sorts. Just then, from the side, there came the sound of everyone inhaling deep breaths before the sounds of exclamation and excitement reached Hushi's ears. Heavens! This is 100 Herb Mist. I'm not dreaming. I thought that I'd be trapped in the white fog forever and would die in there. I didn't expect to get in here. I'm so blessed that I must be going to die soon. Hurry up. Quickly take everything. These medicinal herbs belong to our Xianhe sect. When we bring these back with us, we'll make a fortune, ha ha ha. Hushi turned her head and saw a group of people with their eyes blood red. It looked like they'd lost all reason. They were all staring at the medicinal field with fixed gazes, while their eyes were slowly becoming more bloodshot and glinted with unlimited craziness and greed. The next moment it was unknown who, but someone suddenly shouted, "Quickly take everything." This group of people had actually lost their minds, and like crazy, they all rushed into the medicinal field. Amongst these people the aloof third prince, Shangguan Rui and his bodyguards, were included. Shangguan Rui's cultivation base was usually not considered high, and almost all of his spiritual power had been drained away by the white fog. But at this very moment, he looked like he was being hit by a rush of stimulants as he immediately took the lead in rushing into the medicinal field. His hands that were pulling at the herbs were continually trembling, and his mouth kept muttering, "Jinling seed, Tianyuan fruit. As long as I have these, I'll be able to advance to gold core stage. Jinling Kingdom's throne will be mine, haha." While this was happening, Shangguan Rui's two personal bodyguards who were expert gold core stage martial artists were also acting crazy as they rushed into the medicinal field, incessantly picking the herbs. The scene quickly turned into chaos as the martial artists advanced from crazily picking the herbs to irrationally fighting over them without restraint. Someone seized a Tianyuan fruit and laughed loudly. "This time I'll be able to make a bunch of money." However, this is a Tianyuan fruit. 1,000-year-old Tianyuan fruit. If you consume just one, you can extend your life by 100 years, ha ha ha. However, his laughter quickly cut off with a grunt. Blood sprayed from his throat, and his body fell powerlessly to the ground, while the Tianyuan fruit in his hand was quickly snatched away. The medicinal field was filled with people, and they were obviously high-level martial artists. Yet at this moment, it was like a fight in the markets as they completely ignored their images. In order for their newly plucked herbs to stay within their grasps, some people began to stuff the herbs into their mouths. The high-level spiritual plants were covered with mud and blood, and as they were swallowed, it seemed to make those that ate them become more excitable and crazy. Chapter 310. Wait and see in just a moment. The initially well-organized medicinal field was reduced to chaos. The air that had been permeated with the smell of medicinal herbs was now being replaced by the coppery/metallic stench of blood. Shortly, some of the best high-grade spiritual plants would be devoured by these insane martial artists. One of the bodyguards who had followed from Hell King Manor couldn't help but be anxious as he asked, "Young Master Shi, aren't we going to join in?" Seeing that the high-grade herbs in the medicinal field were going to be utterly ruined soon, they were getting somewhat restless. Hushi shook her head. "This medicinal field is obviously weird. You need to be careful." It was reasonable to say that these martial artists who could enter the Greenwood realm and managed to survive in the white fog were absolutely not lacking in carefulness. However, as soon as they entered the medicinal field, they seemed to have lost all reason. Typically, their first priority after leaving the white fog with no spiritual power would have been to restore their spiritual power by meditation, while being aware of the possibility of other people attacking them. Even if they really wanted to collect medicinal herbs, they would have first fully prepared themselves. Otherwise, even if they got the herb they wanted, it would be snatched away by someone. Not to mention, these martial artists were directly stuffing the medicinal herbs into their mouths. Consuming the medicinal herbs this way would result in the effect reaching less than 1/10 of its potential, and instead, it could precipitate harmful impurities entering the body. Even if these people were greedy, it was impossible for them to make such a stupid choice. Unless, they'd all lost their minds. With this thought, Hushi's eyes couldn't help but scrutinize the area. It didn't need to be said, but Nangongyu, Gu Lufeng, and the others in their group calmly watched the chaotic scene before them as if they were watching a farce. Feng Yunjing and Feng Lianing were also both standing there majestically and motionlessly, showing that they hadn't lost their minds in the slightest. Even the disciples of the Luli sect remained in place. Although they looked impatient, they didn't dare act rashly. Of course, it wasn't only these two groups of people who didn't lose all reason. Whether they were a martial artist on Meridian's stage or Gold Core stage, those with strong resolutions had avoided being enthralled by the medicinal field. Only, although they weren't frenzied, they still had anxious looks on their faces. Young Master Shi, even if this medicinal field is peculiar, if we don't do something soon, all the 5th grade spiritual plants will be ruined. Our Hell King Manor has plenty of attention-focusing pills that can clear the mind and calm the soul. As long as we take one we won't become insane, so isn't it better for us to pick the herbs? Another guard was finally unable to endure it any longer, and he said a bit urgently. Hushi, however, still shook her head. We'll wait to see if any changes occur first. That guard couldn't help but to shift his eyes and look at Nangongyu. Seeing that Nangongyu had no intentions to refute Hushi whatsoever, his face revealed a somewhat irritable look. Hushi had barely finished speaking when Feng Yunjing heard Feng Lianing contemptuously say, "It's just a mere mind confusion. Yet you're scared and want to withdraw first." She then gently looked at Nangongyu and said, "Brother Yu, I have assembling soul fragrance that was given to me by my master. It's the nemesis of mind confusion. In a moment, I'll light the assembling soul fragrance, and you guys can immediately go pick the herbs. I promise you won't lose your minds." Then a small finger-length stick of red incense appeared in her hand. With her white dress fluttering in the breeze and a pale pink silk veil covering her face, the contrast with her beautiful eyes was stunning. At this moment, the incense was lit, and a light smoke rose in spirals to curl around everyone, quickly clearing the minds of those who had lost all reason. Chapter 311. The Safest Place? Everyone now had a relaxed expression on their face, and they were looking at Feng Lianing with gazes of admiration and gratefulness. All the martial artists in the medicinal field who had been killing each other and devouring the medicinal herbs gradually began to sober, each of them revealing a horrified and confused expression. Abruptly, there were sudden exclamations from the people that had sobered. So it was all thanks to Luli Sec's Ice Lotus Fairy. It's no wonder that she had such methods to easily dispel the mind confusion. Ice Lotus Fairy is indeed a person with a virtuous heart like in the legends. Everyone in the medicinal field can escape calamity today thanks to the help of such a fairy. The praises coming from all the people made a haughty and arrogant expression appear on Feng Lianying's face. But when she looked at Nangongyu, her eyes became gentle and watery. It's just a minor accomplishment, nothing worth mentioning. To be able to help everyone is Lianying's privilege. Brother Yu, quickly go pick the spiritual plants in the medicinal field. Many of spiritual plants here are rare, so maybe even your illness will be able to benefit greatly. For the martial artists who had now become cleared-headed and were waiting outside the medicinal field, once they heard her words, some of them couldn't endure any longer, and they rushed back into the medicinal field. This act caused the anxiety of Hell King Manor's bodyguards to increase. Even Wu Yu was eager to move forward and pick herbs in the medicinal field. However, Hushi held out a hand to stop them. Hold on. This medicinal field is rather complicated. You shouldn't act rashly. Feng Lianing mockingly laughed at Hushi. Isn't young Master Shi too cautious? 100 Herb Mist is in Greenwood Realm, however, it was personally created and planted by Zijin's master. The white fog surrounding the medicinal field, and the spiritual energy being emitted from the herbs is all there to ward off the spiritual beasts and people who come after it and want to ruin it. Therefore, this medicinal field could even be said to be the safest place in the sealed dragon domain. As for that mind confusion, Feng Lianing shook her head in disdain, then sneeringly said, "Young master, she is too ignorant and inexperienced, so therefore, you might not understand. There are 2 types of herbs in the medicinal field, and once they mature, their fragrances will mix to create mind confusion and confuse a person's mind. But this kind of mind confusion is only effective on martial artists that are of gold core stage and below, and those who are mentally weak. It's not intentionally targeting us. I didn't expect that just a mere mind confusion scent would actually frighten young master Shi." Hee. At this moment, Nie Jinchen walked forward to stand beside Feng Lianing and followed up her remarks by snidely saying, "Little sister Lianling, he's only a low-level martial artist who comes from a small place. It's only natural that he hasn't seen the world yet. There's no need for you to lower yourself for such a person." After that, he looked up at Nangong Yu. "Nangong, it's unlikely that you'll believe that kid over Lian Ying's judgment, right? Don't forget. She's a 6th-rank doctor." Nangong Yu slightly narrowed his eyes. There was cold malice contained within his eyes, and yet the expression on his face was indifferent as he smiled lightly and said, "I came to this medicinal field for Shier's sake. Since Shier said that it was unnecessary to pick them, it's fine if I don't touch any of these herbs." Then his cold gaze swept over the bodyguards around him. "Whatever young master she says goes. If anyone dares question it, you better get lost from the major cloud array." As soon as he finished speaking, the bodyguards of Hell King Manor immediately shut their mouths in fear, while Feng Lianing, on the other hand, was seething with anger. Nie Jinchen saw that her face was purple with rage, and he couldn't help but feel distressed. Clenching his teeth, he said, "Little sister Lianing, you don't have to bother about this group of cowards. I'll go now and collect the Chunxiang fruit that you want." After saying that, he ruthlessly glared at Hushi, before he then turned around and walked towards the center of the medicinal field. Chapter 312. Purgatory on Earth. Soon, Nie Jinchen had picked a 5th-grade spiritual plant, a Chunxiang fruit. While walking back, he aimed a provocative grin towards Hushi and the others. However, before Nie Jinchen could leave the medicinal field, he suddenly heard a shrill scream coming from behind him. Nie Jinchen instinctively turned his head around and saw the shadows of 2 people emerge from the depths of the medicinal field. Specifically, the hill which was exuding the colorful rays of light. When the 2 people neared Nie Jinchen, and he could clearly see their appearances, he immediately released a cry of, "Ah!" It was unknown when, but the faces of the pair had been covered with blood blisters. The largest of the blood blisters were the size of grapes, while the smallest ones were the size of a woman's pinky nail. The blood blisters were squished together. Some were purple, while some were dark red. Because they were so densely packed together on her face, it made a person want to vomit at first glance. Their eyes were bloodshot, and as they ran, their hands uncontrollably scratched at their faces. This caused the blisters to pop and their faces to look like they were melting as filthy pus and watery blood streaked down their cheeks. "Save me." One of them reached out his hand towards Nie Jinchen, his eyes full of pleading and fear. That hand trembled violently, and the fingertips were covered with a mix of red and white pus. In just a moment, it was about to grab onto Nie Jinchen's clothes. Nie Jinchen suddenly returned to his senses, and reacting like he'd seen a ghost, he shouted loudly and flew out of the medicinal field like a madman. The 2 people were unable to catch Nie Jinchen, so with hesitation, they changed direction and staggered towards the crowds. While they ran, they uttered wretched screams of, "Save me dash! Save me dash! I don't want to die!" All of the people standing outside the medicinal field were stunned when they saw this scene, their faces showing alarm. However, the horror was far from finished. Those who had sobered within the medicinal field because of the assembling soul fragrance abruptly fainted without warning. While the martial artists who devoured the spiritual plants whole found ugly red patches developing on their faces at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. These red patches quickly spread to cover their entire body, and there was a tendency for them to swell into blood blisters. The martial artists who had red patches spreading across their bodies continually twitched, and even though they were all in a coma, they still uttered pained groans. Their faces were contorted into expressions of agony. In the blink of an eye, the medicinal field that had just a moment ago been covered in martial artists rushing about like headless chickens had now become a scene of purgatory on earth. Nie Jinchen stared at the scene before him in horror. His face was pale, and absolute dread made his body slightly tremble. Suddenly, he came to his senses and threw away the jade box in his hand that had contained the chunxiang fruit like a frightened deer, his expression terrified. Gu Lufeng laughed and said, "I wonder who it was that just said that this medicinal field was definitely not dangerous and that our little Yuer had never seen the world? In the end, who is that hasn't yet seen the world?" His gaze landed on Nie Jinchen's hands. Clicking his tongue, he gloated as he said, "You just touched the herb directly with your hand. You might have been infected. When the time comes for you to also have the appearance of a zombie. TSK, it's a pity about your face." Nie Jinchen was so frightened that he staggered backwards and knocked into Feng Lianing, who had just walked over. Feng Lianing covered her sore nose that had bumped into him, and stared at the hellish scene of anguished wailing coming from the medicinal field, her face turning pale. Just a moment ago she'd almost followed them into the medicinal field. If she'd been infected and had her appearance become so terrifying. Just thinking of the consequences made Feng Lianying's body become cold, and her breathing to become heavy. Chapter 313. Intuition. Gu Lufeng moved closer to Hushi, and smiled lazily as he said, "Little Yuer, you'd long ago seen the problem with these spiritual herbs?" Hushi's expression was indifferent as she slowly nodded. However, all the bodyguards from Hell King Manor suddenly returned to their senses, and despite the fear they were all feeling, they were looking at Hushi with expressions full of gratefulness. Just now, if it weren't for their princess stopping them, they could very well have ended up with a horrific appearance too. It was no wonder that Master doted so much on Princess, and was so trusting in regards to her medical skill. There were so many high-level martial artists here, and even a fifth-ranked doctor, but Princess was the only person who saw through the strangeness of this medicinal field. "How did you know that there was a problem with the spiritual herbs?" a cold voice suddenly asked, interrupting everyone's arguing. It was unknown when Feng Yunjing had moved to Hushi's side, but he was now leaning his head towards her with his eyes burning as he waited for her answer. Hushi glanced at him before indifferently answering, "Intuition." This perfunctory answer caused Feng Yunjing's face to frown in anger. He hadn't expected that even though he'd discarded his honor to ask, Hushi would dare not to give him any face. But in fact, Hushi didn't actually lie. When it came to the spiritual herbs within this medicinal field, whether it was color, shape, scent, or spiritual power fluctuations, they all were exactly the same as real herbs. She couldn't accurately pinpoint what was wrong with the herbs, but her doctor's natural instinct made her feel naturally sensitive towards poisonous substances. This was also coupled with Dandan's warning from her space in the beginning. "Mother, there are dangerous things here, be careful." Therefore, she could be sure that there must be a problem with this medicinal field. The Luli sect's disciples who'd followed behind Feng Yunjing couldn't bear to see their young master being ignored in such a way, and couldn't help but scorn. So as it turns out, it wasn't because of genuine talent, but only blind luck. A fan suddenly appeared in Wu Yu's hand, and while fanning himself he laughingly said, "I'm afraid that some people here don't even have blind luck, and yet they still think that they're amazing." Gu Lufeng promptly joined in and laughed as he said, "Exactly. And who was it that said that intuition is not a type of strength? Perhaps some of the people who are a part of a certain sect will not have the strength to bluff well enough." They both played off each other and ridiculed the Luli sect and Feng Lianing. When the disciples of Luli's sect heard such mocking words, they were filled with indignation. Nie Jinchen was even more incensed and started cursing. "Gu Lufeng, don't fucking pretend to know what's best. Do any of you have the qualifications to slander little sister Lianing and the Luli sect? Do you think that I won't kill you?" Wu Yu waved the fan as he chuckled. "Oh, so you're going to kill people to silence them? I'm so scared." I wonder who it was that was just in the major cloud array asking my master not to kill them. Since eating Hushi's delicious food, Wuyu had firmly established the principle of unwaveringly holding the princess's words on a high pedestal. If Princess were to ever argue with his master, he would undoubtedly support Princess to the end. Yeah, everything is worth it for food. Gu Lufeng saw Feng Lianying's extremely unsightly face, and sneered. Which one our words was slanderous? Wasn't it because of your Luli Sec's Ice Lotus Fairy that more people lost consciousness? At that time, many martial artists had entered the medicinal field and fallen unconscious because of Feng Lianying's assembling soul fragrance. Feng Yunjing glanced at Wu Yu, then looked at Nan Gongyu, a corner of his mouth rising slightly. How come I was unaware that the servants from Hell King Manor could be so uncontrolled? Chapter 314. Ice Lotus Fairy, save me. Nan Gongyu's expression was indifferent, and he carelessly said, he's new and still doesn't understand the rules. Yunjing, you don't have to bother about him. At this moment, Wu Yu was disguised as an ordinary bodyguard, but where was there a bodyguard who had enough guts to provoke the Feng family? This, together with Nan Gongyu's cold attitude. Feng Yunjing clearly understood that he was being lied to. Wu Yu wanted to say something more, but Qing Long stepped forward and lightly pressed his hand down on Wu Yu's shoulder, shaking his head at him. Now was not the time to cause trouble with the Luli sect. Otherwise, all of their master's previous work would be ruined. Wu Yu curled his lip as he closed his mouth, and didn't say anything further. At this moment, the two men who had appeared with blood blisters and pus dripping down their bodies started crawling away from the medicinal field. As soon as they saw Feng Lianing, their eyes lit up, and they staggered towards her. Wherever they went, the other martial artists avoided them as if they were poisonous snakes. Feng Lianing also wanted to run away, but because of her fear, her feet failed to move. Ice Lotus Fairy, save us! Wretched shouts resounded throughout the medicinal field. The two men plopped to the ground to kneel in front of Feng Lianing, hissing in pain as they yelled. I'm the master of the Morong family, Morong Zhangfeng. My Morong family has always been on peaceful terms with the Luli sect. I beg you, please save us. As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone couldn't help but be surprised. These two people covered in blood blisters who couldn't be recognized unexpectedly turned out to be the master of the Morong family, Morong Zhangfeng, someone from one of the four major families of Yanjing City. The other was Morong Zhangfeng's father, the elder of Morong Manor, Morong Hai, Yanjing City's famous third-rank doctor. These two people suddenly threw themselves before Feng Lianing, their fingers stretching to touch her delicate hand, their pus and blood-covered hands already clutching her snow-white clothes. Feng Lianing was so terrified that her complexion lost all color, turning a sickly pale as she stepped back several paces. Her eyes were full of horror and disgust. Feng Yunjing, who was watching from the side, frowned when he heard the two people reveal their identities, and asked, "How did you end up like this?" Seeing that the person questioning them was the young master of the Feng family, Feng Yunjing, how could they dare to delay answering? Enduring the acute pain racking their bodies and the fear in their hearts, they quickly told the whole story. It turned out that the Morong family had been the first people to enter the medicinal field through the major cloud array. When they had first entered the medicinal field, they'd also discovered that there was the scent of mind confusion in the air that could cause a person to lose their mind. However, the Morong family had Morong Hai with them, a third-rank doctor. Therefore, they were naturally unafraid of such a trifling poison. As soon as the mind confusion scent had been removed, they began to collect the herbs within the field. There were countless fifth-grade spiritual plants within the medicinal field. And later, when someone noticed the hill that was glowing with colorful rays of light, they found sixth-grade spiritual plants that could make one go insane with greed. But just as the Morong family were ecstatic, people from their group began to faint and become feverish. No matter how much Morong Hai examined them, he couldn't discover why they'd fallen unconscious. What's worse was that the red rash began to spread on the faces of the unconscious people. The red rash grew at a speed that was visible to the naked eye before they then turned into giant blood blisters. These blood blisters growing on their bodies were extremely itchy. So itchy that even people with sharp minds couldn't help but scratch. Unfortunately, even if you didn't scratch at them, after a while, the blisters would still pop and turn into a horribly bloody mess. Once the blood blisters began to burst, the person's skin and internal organs would start rotting until they died. Chapter 3:15. Distraught Gu Lufeng recalling the experiences of the past half an hour, Murong Zhangfeng's eyes were full of fear and despair. He didn't dare look at his own hands and feet, and he avoided even thinking about what his face looked like. He could only place all his hopes on Ice Lotus Fairy. Everyone knew that Ice Lotus Fairy was an intermediate member of the Doctors Association, and that she was also one of the best 5th-ranked doctors found on Miluo continent. We of the Murong family entered the medicinal field with 29 people, but now there are only 2 of us who are still alive. The others are all dead, they're all dead. We don't want to die. Young Master Feng, please let Ice Lotus Fairy save us. Your Feng family's great kindness, our Murong family will certainly repay back 100-fold in the future. Of the 29 people, only 2 had survived. Fear was visible on everyone's face. Did that mean that all those unconscious martial artists in the medicinal field will die too? Hushi and the others had initially been observing the development of things quietly, but then the Murong family had said that. Gu Liufeng's body suddenly started trembling before he then stormed forward without warning, and fiercely glared at Murong Zhangfeng. You just said that everyone else is dead? Then what about Gui Dao? Didn't he come in with you? Murong Zhangfeng looked at him, and his eyes flashed, his expression quickly morphing into one of loss as he wailed. Dead, he's dead. Gu Liufeng's lips slightly parted as his eyes filled with shock and horror. He stood blankly, his lifeless expression changing into one of hatred as he looked down at Murong Zhangfeng. A raging flame burned in his eyes as if he was ready to mutilate him. Abruptly, he turned around and rushed towards the medicinal field. Fortunately, Wu Yu's hands moved faster, and he rushed over and grabbed him. Are you crazy? Don't you see what they look like once they enter the field? Aren't you afraid that you'll become like them too? Don't you want to live anymore? Don't bother about me. Gu Lufeng roared like a trapped beast, his body violently struggling. I have to save him. Whether I live or die has nothing to do with you. Gu Lufeng was a peak gold core stage martial artist, so in regards to his power he was still higher than Wu Yu. How would Wu Yu be able to stop him? So letting go, he watched as Gu Lufeng recklessly charged towards the medicinal field. Seeing that Gu Lufeng had lost his mind, Hushi frowned. Although she had only known Gu Lufeng for a short time, he had always been calm, graceful, and relaxed. She had never seen such a distraught Gu Lufeng before. It seemed that this Gu Yidao was extremely important to him. Hushi pulled on Nangong Yu's sleeve, whispered a few words in his ear, and then slipped him a small bottle of medicine. A corner of Nangong Yu's mouth twitched, reluctance written all over his face. Sheer, you're so concerned about that kid, yet I haven't seen you be that good to me. Seeing Hushi glaring at him, he could only ignore his jealousy. Leaning close to Hushi's ear, he softly whispered, I can listen to your words and help him. However, you have to reward me later, Sheer. Without waiting for Hushi to respond, his figure had already disappeared. While Gu Lufeng, who had just reached the edge of the medicinal field, suddenly felt pressure like Mount Tai pressing down on him. Just as he was about to fight against it, Nangong Yu suddenly reached out and poured the medicine from the bottle into Gu Liufeng's slightly parted mouth. Spiritual energy began to swiftly fill the air, and the medicine instantly spread throughout his body. Gu Lufeng felt his eyes blurring before he then lost consciousness. Chapter 3:16. Last hope. Nangong Yu grabbed Gu Liufeng's collar and dragged him back like a small chicken, throwing him in front of Hushi. Then leaning close to her, he softly whispered, Reward. Hushi remained silent. Looking over, she saw him with his face turned to the side and staring at her with a look which explicitly demanded that she kisses him. Hushi immediately turned away. Nangong Yu wasn't annoyed. Instead, he took her into his arms and lightly pecked her on a corner of her mouth. And then with a husky voice he whispered in her ear, Princess refused to take the initiative and reward me, so I had to collect it for myself. I had to exert myself and make an effort. I can't lose at all. Scoundrel. Hushi fiercely glared at him, then turned her head away and refused to look at him. However, both of her cheeks were bright crimson. Feng Yunjing saw this scene from where he was standing, and his expression suddenly became gloomy. A cold aura, like a poisonous snake, seemed to circulate within his deep eyes. Ah! Suddenly, an ear-piercing scream came from within the medicinal field. The martial artists who'd been unconscious in the medicinal field abruptly started to awaken, one after the other. But the red rash on everyone's faces had morphed into red and purple blood blisters, some people's blisters seeming to grow faster than others. In a moment, the blood blisters continued to swell, and then pop. Next, yellow-red blood flowed down their bodies. Their appearances were even more horrible than the evil spirits that crawled out of hell. The faces of everyone standing outside the medicinal field were full of fear, and they quickly rushed backwards. Some of those who had small guts and a weak tolerance had already started wailing while rushing to the side and vomiting. The medicinal field before their eyes was like a scene of hell on earth. Abruptly, a person whose whole body was decaying, his original appearance unrecognizable, rushed while stumbling towards Feng Lianing. He kneeled down in front of Feng Lianing, hissing and wailing, "Ice Lotus Fairy, save me. I'm Shengguan Rui. You can break the mind confusion scent. You must have a way to heal us. You're also the direct disciple of Thousand Venom Valley's master. No one in the world can save us except for you. I'm begging you." When Shengguan Rui said this, everyone in the medicinal field who had been filled with despair suddenly latched onto those words as their last hope. People immediately surged towards Feng Lianing like a tide, and shouted, "Ice Lotus Fairy, save us." These people were currently unaware of how horrible their appearances were at this moment. Moreover, even after having been alive for so many years, none of them had ever seen such a terrible illness before. Now they all had the appearances of zombies. It was almost like they'd been sentenced to the death penalty. However, while no one really wanted to die, they also didn't want to live as they were either. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, they would hang on to it at all costs. What's more, who in all of Miluo continent didn't know of Ice Lotus Fairy's reputation? At such a young age she was already a 5th-ranked doctor, an intermediate-level member of the Doctors Association, and a direct disciple of Thousand Venom Valley's master. With her here, maybe they still had a chance. No, with Ice Lotus Fairy here, they would undoubtedly be saved. Feng Lianing saw all of their sinister and disgusting faces, and the fear and loathing in her heart reached extreme levels. She felt like the air was filled with a fishy smell, making her itch to kick these nauseating people away. However, it was at this moment that Wu Yu waved his fan, and raised his voice as he said, "Everyone can rest assured, Ice Lotus Fairy has the heart of a bodhisattva, kind and charitable. When everyone is suffering so terribly, how could she just bear watching? Not to mention, her medical skills are excellent, and she has a crucial position in the Doctors Association. Naturally, she can find a way to heal you. If even this cannot be done, wouldn't she be ruining her name as Ice Lotus Fairy?" Chapter 317. Recognized medical genius. As soon as these words were said, the eyes of those who were kneeling on the ground and begging Feng Lianing revealed their hope. Feng Lianing's face was still pale, and her heart was full of disgust as she looked at these people. However, Wu Yu's words filled her with a high sense of vanity. That's right. She was a rare medical genius that appears once every few centuries in Miluo continent. Whether it was in alchemy or healing, she was much better than the unskilled trash who relied on treacherous methods to profit once or twice. Although these martial artists were disgusting, most of them had extraordinary backgrounds. If she could cure these people in full view of everyone, her prestige in Miluo continent and her position in her family would be significantly enhanced. And in the end, Brother Yu would clearly know who was truly outstanding and deserving of matching him. Feng Lianying's gaze couldn't help but look at Nan Gongyu, yet he didn't see her at all. Instead, he bent his head and spoke with Hushi, acting as if there was nobody else present. Feng Lianing was so angry that her face was distorted, while both of her hands were clenched tightly into fists. Humph. She'll let Brother Yu see that she was the best person, and that only she was worthy of the position of Princess of Hell King Manor. With these thoughts, Feng Lianing stepped forward and was about to boast about her medical skills. However, she abruptly heard Feng Yunjing's cold voice say, "Are you sure that you can cure these people? If you're not, then don't show off and lose face for our Feng family." The arrogant look on Feng Lianying's face suddenly transformed into anger. Although her voice was deliberately lower, it was still a bit sharp as she said, "Big brother, you believe that slut, but you don't believe me? Don't forget, I'm a 5th-ranked doctor that's recognized as a medical genius under the heavens. Not to mention, big brother, you seem to have forgotten what kind of person my master is, Thousand Venom Valley's master. What kind of poisons haven't I seen before?" Feng Yunjing indifferently glanced at her. "You're certain that you can help them?" Feng Lianying's eyes flashed, and gritting her teeth she said, "Big brother, don't worry, I've just remembered this illness, and I've seen it in Master's book, the 1000 Poison Record. I clearly recall that there was a solution in there." Feng Lianing spoke with perfect confidence, so it made Feng Yunjing somewhat believe in her. Since this was the case, he retreated several steps and didn't say anything more. If Feng Lianing really had a way to cure this group of people, it'll mean that these people or their masters would all owe a favor to the Feng family. Feng Yunjing would naturally be glad for such an outcome. As Feng Lianing finished speaking, she quickly stepped forward. Her first move was to head towards Shengguan Rui, the 3rd prince of Jinling Kingdom. When Feng Lianing saw the man's face covered in blood blisters and pus, her eyes filled with disgust. In contrast, the look on her face was very kind, gentle, and filled with compassion. "Your Highness 3rd Prince, please rest assured, I will definitely save you all." As soon as she stated this, the surrounding martial artists immediately burst into an enthusiastic cheer. Whether it was the people infected, or those just watching, they all kowtowed in gratitude and praised Feng Lianing as a living Buddha. A haughty and pleased smile hung on Feng Lianying's face as her beautiful eyes swept over everyone. "Lianing is also a part of the cultivation world, so I naturally can't see anyone die without trying to save them. This is my Feng family's constant purpose. You don't have to thank me." After that, she pointed to the martial artist who was still unconscious in the medicinal field. "I'll have to trouble everyone to bring those who are not yet awake and those unable to move in the medicinal field, and place them together in one area." Chapter 318. Kindly remind them, of course, no one could enter the medicinal field. So after thinking for a minute, the martial artists all summoned tools such as whips, long ropes, and so on, to pull over those in the medicinal field. After these people had pulled over those who were ill from the medicinal field, 2 or 3 more people would carry the ill to a cleared area. The whole time the martial artists were doing this, they were aiming flattering smiles towards Feng Lianing. She couldn't help raising a corner of her mouth and revealing a mysterious smile. Suddenly, Nangongyu leaned over to her ear and softly whispered, "If there's something funny, then you better tell me. Let your husband be happy too." She glanced at him, too lazy to correct his stupid way of addressing himself, and chuckled. "Guess yourself." Nangongyu reached out his hand to poke the tip of her nose, his tone full of affection as he said, "Cheeky. If I guess correctly, then what are you going to give me as a reward?" Wanting another reward. This guy was having too much fun playing around with her. He'll become addicted. He shoved his hand away, then unhappily said, "In your dreams." However, Nangongyu abruptly leaned closer to her ear again, and with a quiet voice slowly said, "This king guesses that the poison will not only infect the ones entering the medicinal field, but those who come into contact with the infected." Hearing that, Hushi couldn't help laughing. She had absolutely no sympathy as she watched those enthusiastic martial artists try to curry favor with Feng Lianing. Instead, she smirked and said, "Yeah, I wonder if they'll still praise Ice Lotus Fairy after they find out that they've also been poisoned." Nangongyu saw the playful smile on the corners of Hushi's mouth, the waves of light swirling in her eyes, and smelled her fragrance. Next, his eyes were drawn to her crafty smile, especially those pink and soft lips, with her pearly white teeth. Nangongyu could feel his heart swelling, so reaching out, he took her into his embrace. Then, using one of his wide sleeves to block everyone's line of sight, he kissed her. After a long while, Hushi fiercely pushed him away. Her soft pink lips were slightly red and swollen as she glared angrily at him, her eyes rippling with emotions. What are you doing when we're in a public place? Nangongyu gently ran a finger across her long eyelashes, smiling as he said, Haven't I said it before? This king never makes a losing transaction. Rewards I'm owed must be claimed. Just before Hushi was about to get angry, Nangongyu promptly changed the topic with a two-faced smile on his face. What do you think, should we kindly remind them? Hushi was startled at the sudden change in topic and stared blankly at first. Then her eyes swiftly swept over everyone from the Luli sect before she laughed. Nangongyu was worse than her. However, she rather liked such a personality very much. Under Nangongyu's gaze, Wuyu quickly started blabbering nonstop. He shouted at the group of people who were carrying the sick people. Tisk tsk, that blackish blood is so disgusting. Since you've all touched it directly, aren't you afraid your bodies will stink too? One of them, following Feng Lianying's instructions, and meticulously taking care of their clothes, immediately raised his head and answered back sarcastically. Saving a life is more important than one's belongings. Ice Lotus Fairy doesn't hesitate to use her spiritual power and her precious medicinal pills to save them, but yet you actually still care about being dirty. If you have a heart of stone like this when seeing those who are about to die, and have no inclination to save them, it's simply not worth you living in this world. Right. Those people don't even deserve to carry Ice Lotus Fairy's shoes. You guys clearly don't understand what a noble character is, and what it is to dedicate your life to a worthwhile cause. Voices continuously echoed throughout the medicinal field, making Hushi, who heard it, almost laugh. If these people weren't dressed in ancient attire, she would have thought that she'd returned to the assassin organization of her past life. Chapter 319. Too shameless. Being ridiculed by these people didn't make Wuyu angry at all, and he instead chuckled. As expected, my good intentions were ignored. Didn't any of you discover that it's only you guys who touched those sick people? If saving them was really that worthwhile, then why didn't even one person from the Luli sect move to help? I hope you don't regret your actions later. Feng Lianying was filled with hatred when she heard that, but she didn't look at Wuyu, instead choosing to look at Hushi standing nearby. Young Master Shi, it seems like you're slyly trying to create discord in the relationship between everyone and the Luli sect. What are your intentions? You don't want everyone to be saved. Or do you want to wait until everyone is dead so you can gain an advantage? Although I knew you were vicious, I didn't expect you to be so vicious in such a situation. When Feng Lianying spat out these words, everyone's angry eyes turned to glare at Hushi. Hushi just leisurely smiled. She had absolutely no intention to respond. Wuyu, however, sneeringly said, Obviously it was me who spoke, but why did Ice Lotus Fairy accuse someone else? Rather than glare at me, why don't you take a look at what's happened to the people behind you? As Wuyu finished speaking, they all heard a few bangs from behind them. Several people had fainted to the ground. Their faces were flushed, and their bodies were burning hot. Some people even had red rashes on their faces. How is this possible? The martial artists exclaimed in alarm. These people obviously hadn't entered the medicinal field. It's the pus. The pus on them is contagious. Everybody run quickly. For a moment, everyone's faces were covered in fear and shock before they all ran away from those who were already sick. The previously ordered scene had once again become chaotic, and there was no one taking care of those who were sick. With their own little lives at risk, what noble character in gaining pleasure from helping others. That was all empty talk. In just a moment, the entire scene was filled with chaos, and the medicinal field was a cacophony of terror. Suddenly, Feng Lianying raised her voice and indignantly asked, Young Master Shi, since you knew that this disease was contagious, why didn't you say something earlier? That would have prevented more people from being infected, right? Hushi looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. I thought you knew that. After all, aren't you a fifth-rank doctor? How could I dare to meddle in your affairs and tell you what to do? Feng Lianying clenched her teeth, hatred gleaming in her eyes. Human life is immeasurable. How could what happened before cause you to have a grudge against me and neglect so many people's lives? I was busy thinking about how to treat everyone's ailments. Naturally, I couldn't worry about so much at one time. But young Master Shi, you obviously knew yet you didn't say it. For what purpose? Are the lives of these 100-odd people less important to you than your personal grudge? After Feng Lianing spoke, everyone suddenly looked at Hushi with gazes full of contempt and resentment. Especially those people whose friends and relatives had fallen unconscious. They didn't even know if they themselves were infected or not, so they felt even more hatred towards Hushi. They had all drawn out their long swords as they itched to rush forwards and kill her. Wu Yu was simply amazed at Feng Lianying's ability to deliberately distort the truth. Previously, he was unaware of why Gu Lufeng and his princess hated Feng Lianing so much. After all, he'd only met Feng Lianing a few times, yet he also knew that she liked his own master. But now he'd seen the reason. She was a treacherous and vicious woman. She was simply too shameless. Chapter 320, Strange Blood Poison, TSATSK. You say that as if I hadn't reminded all of you a moment ago, but did any of you guys listen to me? Wu Yu raised his voice, his tone filled with ridicule. Weren't you all the ones who'd previously said that you wanted to selflessly help the sick, with no regards to your own safety? Now that there's danger, you blame us for not reminding you? Your words are just like farts. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had just been about to charge at Hushi in anger when they'd abruptly stopped. But even though they'd stopped, their expressions were all still extremely ugly. Wu Yu lightly chuckled once again. Furthermore, was Ice Lotus Fairy really unaware that this sickness was contagious? After I said something, if she really didn't know, then why wasn't even one person from the Lu Li sect moving to help? In the end, the only ones who were infected were all of you who were helping. Why you don't talk nonsense? Feng Lianying's body was trembling due to anger. She almost couldn't help but want to attack. However, she was stopped by Feng Yinjing. His icy gaze swept over the skeptical expressions on everyone's faces, and he coldly said, "First, save those who are infected. Then we'll talk about it again. There are other more important things to do than speak skillfully. There is nothing to argue about." Those who were dissatisfied after listening to Wu Yu immediately quietened under Feng Yunjing's glare. Their complexions paled, and they felt alarmed. Even those who still had doubts didn't dare think about it again. This was the power and prestige of a young master from the Feng family, and the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul-stage martial artist. Feng Lianing took a deep breath, her face regaining its refined and noble look before she slowly walked up to Shangguan Rui. Waving her fingers, she quickly formed a sealing technique. Following that, blue spiritual power representing the water attribute entered Shangguan Rui's body. Water attribute and wood attribute spiritual powers were special spiritual attributes unique to high-ranked doctors. Although martial artists with other spiritual roots could also practice medical techniques, it would be challenging for them to attain a high rank. Wood represented life, while water represented healing. For a doctor, the wood attribute spiritual power was of a higher rank. However, when those with the water attribute wanted to advance a doctor rank, it was twice as hard when compared to those with a wood attribute. When everyone saw Feng Lianying's ball of water spiritual power, they couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Although her water attribute spiritual power wasn't of the highest rank, you could tell from its rich spiritual power that it was extremely pure. Feng Lianing used her water attribute to envelope Shangguan Rui, conducting a detailed examination of his body. Then, a flash of understanding lit up her eyes, and a corner of her mouth raised in a proud smile. After the examination, she was confident that her guess was correct. What these people were suffering from was a strange poison recorded in her master's book, the 1000 Poison Record. Her fingers waved once more, and the people watching were dazzled as the spiritual power that had entered Shangguan Rui's body returned to Feng Lianing. This gorgeous movement caused everyone's admiration of Feng Lianing to increase. Their eyes were brimming with hope and expectation as they looked at her. After Feng Lianing retrieved her spiritual power, She revealed a confident smile and slowly said, I have a diagnosis of your condition. It's a poison called intoxicated blood, which is an incredibly rare and strange poison. It normally only appears in the desert of the far north, so I don't know why it would appear in 100 herb mist. However, please rest assured that I already know what the cure to this poison is. The antidote is a 5 elements blood coagulation pill made from purple monkey flowers, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass. The herbs needed for this kind of medicine are extremely unique and hard to find in the world. Fortunately, I have plenty 5 elements blood coagulation pills refined by my master, so I'm now able to detoxify the poison in everyone's bodies. Chapter 321. Are you Gui Dao? Feng Lianying's face was full of arrogance and pride as her delicate hands slowly fished out a bottle of medicine. Then, she poured out a 5 elements blood coagulation pill and gave it to Shangguan Rue. In less time than it takes to burn a stick of incense, Shangguan Rue, who'd initially been on the verge of dying, had started to regain his vitality. His body that had been festering, with pus continuously flowing down it like a stream, slowly stopped rotting. Even the pus-filled wounds started closing. Shangguan Rue's face was filled with joy. He had miraculously managed to return from death's door. Kneeling in front of Feng Lianying, he said with a trembling voice, I feel my spiritual power gradually coming back, and the burning like pain in my internal organs is also slowly disappearing. Ice Lotus Fairy, your medical skills are really unparalleled. I, Shangguan Rue, will never forget your kindness. As he uttered those words, an enthusiastic cheer burst forth from the crowd. One by one, they all yelled Ice Lotus Fairy, and they gazed at her like they were looking at a goddess delivering salvation. They were all filled with admiration and gratefulness. When Hushi saw this scene before her, she couldn't help but laugh lightly at Nangong side. Look at how your little sister Lianing is worshipped. It seems like she still has an infatuation with you too. All this time, she hasn't once forgotten to cast flirtatious glances towards you. Yet you aren't moved at all. Such a heartless little girl. Nangong reached out his hand and pinched her elegant little nose unhappily saying, Who's my little sister Lianing? In this world, there's only a Nalan Hushi who's mine, understand? In the future, if you say something incorrectly again, then don't blame this king for punishing you. Hushi's face was bright red as she swat his misbehaving hand away, and she wanted to pay him back. Suddenly, she heard an exclamation from a Hell King Manor bodyguard. Master, young master, look at that. It looks like someone is approaching. From the direction of the hill, there were 2 silhouettes unexpectedly staggering towards them. The faces of these 2 men were also covered in blood blisters. It was a horrible sight to behold. One of them hadn't even made it out of the medicinal field before he fell to the ground and howled with grief, never to get up again. The other man ran out of the medicinal field while swaying from side to side, incessantly shouting, Help! However, when the man's eyes fell on the unconscious form of Gu Lufeng, he seemed to have forgotten all his pain and fear, and his screams were now full of worry. Lufeng, what happened to you? Seeing that the man was about to charge towards Gu Lufeng, the bodyguards of Hell King Manor used their long swords to block his way threateningly. The man looked up in alarm and saw a group of people staring at him coldly. He couldn't help trembling as he asked, Who are you people? What did you do to Lufeng? Wu Yu waved his fan, arrogantly looking at him as he asked, And who are you? What is your relationship with Gu Lufeng? Don't you know that if you get close to him, you will infect him with the poison on your body? Aye. The man's eyes filled with fear and despair. The blood blisters on his face were even starting to pop one after another, causing his entire face to look horrifying. Hushi suddenly frowned. Are you Gui Dao? How do you know my name? Hushi didn't say anything more. Instead, squatting down, she took out a bottle of medicine and waved it under Gu Liufeng's nose. Gu Liufeng's brows creased tightly, and he quickly awoke. However, he had barely returned to consciousness, and before he could adjust his energy and restore his physical strength, he immediately shouted, Let me go save him. I don't believe that he's dead. Wu Yu patted Gu Liufeng's shoulder to appease him, and said, First, calm down. Do you see who this person is? Chapter 322. The Beginning of a Nightmare. Lulufeng. Are you okay? Gui Dao's voice was hoarse, and he kept releasing painful groans. Fortunately, you're all right at least. There's someone who'll take care of Yulan. Gu Lufeng looked at the man lying on the ground, barely able to recognize his face. After staring blankly for a few minutes, he finally whispered back, "You're your uncle? You didn't die?" As he said that, Gu Lufeng went to rush towards him, only to be stopped by Hushi. "Don't touch him, you'll be infected." Hearing that his poison really was contagious to Gu Lufeng, Gui Dao propped himself up with his hand on the ground and moved backwards several steps before he cried sorrowfully, "Lufeng, uncle. Uncle is already past the point of helping, don't come over. In the future, take good care of your mother, and live well." "Uncle, don't talk nonsense." Gu Lufeng suddenly raised his voice. "You've just been poisoned by an insignificant and strange poison. Why would you die? Didn't I tell you to leave Murong Zhangfeng and them behind when you entered the secret territory, and to wait for me in Greenwood Realm? Why didn't you listen to me, and instead followed them into 100 Herb Mist?" Gui Dao's eyes were somewhat blank before they then filled with fear and pain. In the end, he just lightly sighed and said, "I was in too much of a rush." Gui Dao's younger sister, Gu Yulan, who was also Gu Liufeng's mother, was seriously ill. After having received treatment for so many years, she still showed no signs of recovery. Instead, she was gradually reaching her limit. Gu Lufeng and Gui Dao were desperate, and had decided to take a chance on the secret territory of the Sealed Dragon Domain. After all, the owner of the Sealed Dragon Domain, Master Zijin, was once a person with an outstanding reputation regarding his medical skills. Furthermore, 100 Herb Mist was filled with high-level spiritual plants rare to Miluo continent. Gui Dao was a gold core stage martial artist, and a bodyguard of Murong Manor. This, together with a map of the secret territory he had in his possession that was handed down from generation to generation, he was able to enter 100 Herb Mist through the major cloud array. After arriving at Greenwood Realm, Gui Dao hadn't been able to wait until Gu Lufeng arrived, and had followed the Murong family into the medicinal field. Once they all saw the endless amount of high-level spiritual plants in the medicinal field, they were nearly overcome with madness. However, some of the people who couldn't help but consume those herbs found that afterwards, their bodies were covered in a strange red rash. Gui Dao gazed at the medicinal field, the expression in his eyes becoming one of terror and anger. Back then, half of the 29 people we came in with showed symptoms of being poisoned. But at that time, no one panicked because we had Morong Hai with us, a third-rank doctor. He gave everyone an elixir, and after taking the medicine, everyone's temperature quickly went down. On top of that, the red rashes disappeared without a trace. We all thought that that was the end of our trouble, but who would have thought that it was just the beginning of our nightmare? Gui Dao clenched his teeth, then continued. Not long after taking the medicine, the martial artists who'd originally had the red rashes suddenly began to bleed from the 7 apertures, one of their faces. Eventually, their bodies were completely rotten, until they were nothing but pools of blood. Unfortunately, our nightmare was far from over. After half of them had died, the rest of us, besides Morong Hai and Morong Zhangfeng, also started to experience the symptoms of a fever. Now, it's definite that we were infected due to coming into contact with those who were poisoned. When Gui Dao said that, an extremely pained expression crossed his face, and his body twitched violently. The blood blisters on his face were festering with a speed visible to the naked eye, while black and yellow bloody pus leaked out from his body. His current appearance was horrendous. This appearance was due to Gui Dao suffering from the final stages of the poison. Soon, he would meet with a violent death. Both eyes, both nostrils, both ears, and the mouth. Chapter 323. Ridicule. However, he continuously kept shouting at Gu Lufeng. "Don't come near me. Live well, Lufeng, live well." The inside of Gu Liufeng's mask had long since become damp with tears. Regardless of everything, he still wanted to shake off Wu Yu and rush over to his uncle. However, Hushi was faster than him and scattered a handful of white powder into the air. The white powder landed on Gui Dao's body, and soon, it was absorbed into his flesh. Though the wounds showed no change, Gui Dao's painful wailing silenced, and his body stopped twitching. Hushi looked at Gu Lufeng, and indifferently said, "This powder can only temporarily stop the poison from invading his heart. It won't last long." Gu Lufeng stared blankly at Hushi. Then he suddenly fell to his knees. "Shiyu, can you save him? As long as you save him, my life is yours." Hushi's expression was somewhat grave, and while her voice came out indifferently cold like normal, it had a slight calming effect. "Even if I can save him, my method of healing people is different compared to other doctors. Moreover, it's extremely likely that your uncle will suffer from a great amount of pain. Even then, do you still want me to save him?" But before Gu Lufeng could answer, a soft voice interrupted. "Young Master Gu, I hope you won't take offense, but you can take one of my 5 elements blood coagulation pills for your uncle." Gu Lufeng turned around and saw Feng Lianying looking back at him with a smile spread across her face. Feng Lianying's expression was filled with arrogance, as if she was enjoying watching other people's misfortune. Slightly raising her chin, she said, "Previously, it was young Master Gu who injured me, but it was only because Shiyu bewitched you. I believe that it wasn't intentional. As long as you're willing to sincerely repent, I will naturally save your uncle's life. After all, saving a life is the noble thing to do. And on top of that, I don't want to see you heartbroken. How does that sound?" Standing beside Feng Lianying, Nie Jinchen couldn't help but laugh as he said, "Gu Lufeng, you can't really think that everyone has little sister Lianying's strength and will be capable of saving your uncle's life, right? Don't make the wrong choice and cause harm to your uncle. You'll regret it all your life. If you have any self-consciousness left, then obediently come here and apologize by kowtowing to little sister Lianying. After that, we will kindly help you. How about it?" Feng Lianying glanced at Nie Jingchen, as if she was trying to censure him, then slowly said, "Maybe young master, she really does have a way to cure people? Although he's just on foundation establishment stage and doesn't have a doctor's rank." Nie Jinchen burst into laughter and said, "As if that waste has a way to cure people. He's just talking rubbish. Now that he sees that you, little sister Lianying, have the limelight, he's unsatisfied. There's no need for you to defend such a vicious person." "That's right. How can trash that would be so daring as to deceive everyone be compared with Ice Lotus Fairy? This young master, if you really want to save your uncle, you'd better come and apologize to Ice Lotus Fairy. Really, all kinds of trash are daring to impersonate being a doctor nowadays. This kind of person is simply not even worthy of carrying Ice Lotus Fairy's shoes." One after another, comments were shouted through the medicinal field. Everyone was ridiculing Hushi for overestimating her capabilities. Hushi stopped Nangongyu, who was filled with rage and ready to teach them a lesson, and coldly laughed as she whispered in his ear. Nangongyu stared blankly. Then, following that, he poked the tip of her nose and laughed with an indulging expression on his face. At this moment, Feng Lianying saw the interaction between the two of them, and her face twisted in fury. After a few deep breaths, she managed to restrain her rage and said, "Young Master Gu, have you thought it over? In just a few minutes it'll be too difficult to save your uncle." Chapter 324. I believe in you, or will you kill your uncle for your selfishness? Gu Lufeng closed his eyes, and when they opened again, they were calm and tranquil. "I've made my decision." Nie Jinchen laughed and said, "Since you've thought about it, why don't you hurry up and kowtow to little sister Lianying, acknowledging your mistake?" However, before Nie Jinchen could finish speaking, Gu Lufeng had already stood up. Then looking straight at Hushi, he slowly said, "Please cure my uncle." Hushi raised an eyebrow, and a glint of surprise flashed in her eyes. "Have you properly considered everything? I don't have a doctor's rank, and I'm not a member of the Doctors' Association." Without the slightest hesitation, Gu Lufeng responded, "I believe in you." Looking at this scene, Nie Jinchen's words of humiliation and ridicule seemed to be stuck in his throat. His entire face was flushed red, and it was a long while before he exclaimed, "Gu Lufeng, are you insane? You actually believe that lying stinky brat who doesn't have any achievements. After you cause your uncle's death, you'll regret this decision. The faces of the other people in the medicinal field were all showing their disapproval, and they gazed at Gu Lufeng like they were looking at an idiot. This man would rather reject Ice Lotus Fairy, a 5th-ranked doctor, and instead chose to believe a boy only on foundation establishment stage. Seeing the resolute gaze of Gu Lufeng, a corner of Hushy's mouth lifted into a slight smirk. In that case, then I need you go into the medicinal field to pick up some herbs such as purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass. As soon as she said this, everyone was in an uproar. My God, did I just hear it correctly? Did he just say to pick herbs from the medicinal field? Doesn't he know those herbs are poisonous, and that whoever eats them will die? This is what saving people looks like. It's clearly wanting to kill people. Not to mention, the herbs he just named are the same ones as Ice Lotus Fairy. This clearly means that he doesn't understand anything. He's just copying the diagnosis and prescription of Ice Lotus Fairy. This guy is just too shameless. The surrounding was filled with noise, yet Hushy's expression didn't change in the slightest. She merely watched Gu Lufeng with a relaxed gaze. Gu Lufeng looked at his uncle who was now unconscious yet still groaning, and clenched his teeth as he said, "Okay, I'll go." Insane. This guy must be insane. Entering the medicinal field is equal to courting death. Did that beautiful boy deceive him? How could he make such a decision? I know about the one who wears the mask. He's the boss of Shengda Hall, young Master Gu. With his shrewd intelligence, how could he unequivocally believe the boy's words, yet not believe in Ice Lotus Fairy to help? Perhaps he was seduced by the boy's pretty face, so he doesn't even care about his uncle's safety. Ha ha ha. Gu Lufeng angrily grit his teeth, and in a flash he entered the medicinal field. He was a person who ran a pharmacy, so even though some herbs such as purple monkey flower, pomegranate fire fruit, and dragon grass were uncommon, he could still recognize them easily. Soon, he had used jade boxes to hold a lot of these 3 kinds of herbs and brought them in front of Hushy. When he came out of the medicinal field, Gu Liufeng's forehead was covered in fine layer of sweat, but his gaze was extremely resolute. At this time, Feng Lianying's concerned voice was heard from afar. Young Master Gu, since you entered the medicinal field, it's very likely that you've already been infected with the intoxicated blood poison. You should quickly take one of my 5 elements blood coagulation pills. I don't want you to kowtow and admit your mistake. I just hope that you and your uncle stay alive. After all, we're doctors. We must have benevolent hearts and be charitable in deeds. How could I act like young Master Shi, and treat a patient's life as a trifling matter in order to show off? Chapter 325. Domineering Behavior. Feng Lianing thought that her words were reasonable, refined, and full of integrity. The martial artists nearby who were unaware of her true thoughts expressed their approval. Ice Lotus Fairy really is as kind-hearted as the rumors say. She's such a compassionate person. Ice Lotus Fairy must have been sent from the 9th heaven. She came to deliver us salvation. That brat has no medical ethics. With the way he disregards human life, he shouldn't be allowed to leave the medicinal field alive. Feng Lianing felt like her body was emitting a holy light, and looked down at Gu Lufeng with pity. However, she hadn't expected that Gu Lufeng would merely glance coldly at her, and without a trace of politeness say, "Life and death are determined by fate. There's no need for Ice Lotus Fairy's concern. Not to mention, I feel nauseous just from looking at such a loathsome woman like you, who acts like a white lotus on the outside but is rotten on the inside. If I had to be saved by you, I would rather die in little Yuer's hands." After that, he turned his head away and wholly ignored Feng Lianing. Feng Lianing was shaking all over due to her rage. As she looked at Hushy and Gu Lufeng, her gaze filled with her desire to kill them and crush their bones into dust. At this time, after receiving the herbs, Hushy didn't refine them into medicine as everyone expected. Rather, after releasing a strange ball of fire spiritual power, she then began to directly roast the herbs. As the fire spiritual power burned the 3 herbs, The spiritual energy within the spiritual plants began to slowly be absorbed by the fire spiritual power. With the herbs starting to melt, the originally fresh and tender herbs soon dried up to resemble stalks of grass. What is he doing? He's actually sucked the spiritual energy out of the herbs. What effect will be left in the herbs if he does that? He's obviously pretending to know what he's doing. He wanted to imitate Ice Lotus Fairy and save people, but he's unable to refine even the most basic medicine. Now he's lost face. Even if there is a problem with the herbs in this medicinal field, doing things like this to the herbs is too wasteful. That kind of person thinks he deserves to be called a doctor? How can young Master Gu believe him? Hushi turned a deaf ear to everything around her. With the help of Gu Lufeng and Wu Yu, she quickly produced a medicinal liquid. After decocting the herbs, Hushi came to stand beside Gui Dao. The silver needles in her hand flew like shadows and pierced several of Gui Dao's major acupuncture points. As the silver needles entered Gui Dao's acupuncture points, spiritual power began to leak from his body. Gui Dao's body that had been originally weak, at this moment, due to the loss of spiritual power, weakened until the breaths leaving his mouth were like dying gasps. Seeing his uncle's weak appearance, he eventually couldn't help asking, "Shiyu, my uncle, can he be saved?" Currently, Hushi was confirming whether Gu Yidao's spiritual power was drained. Having heard what was asked, she laughed proudly and slowly said, "There is no end to the medical techniques I can use, but I don't dare to say that I can cure all the world's ailments. Yet, if I say that I can cure someone, then even if it's King Yama, he won't be taking their life. And you guys," her gaze landed on Gu Lufeng, Wu Yu and Qing Long, "it would be enough if all of you just shut up." Gu Lufeng, Wu Yu, Qing Long. Wu Yu and Qing Long. "Princess is too domineering. She's really a perfect match for Master." Nangong Yu caressed Hushi's hair, lightly chuckling as he said, "This king likes such domineering behavior. She really is worthy of being the woman this king fancies." Hushi responded to him with two efficient words. "Get lost dash." The perfectly concocted medicinal liquid was soon poured into Gui Dao's mouth, and after he drank the medicine, his expression suddenly twisted into one of extreme pain. His body, which was already weak, suddenly twitched violently on the ground. Gui Dao's skin, which was initially only slightly festering, not only didn't heal, it instead started sprouting blackish blood blisters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.